Hello guys, and welcome to the Ultimate Attack on Titan Iceberg chart explained. Before the video starts, I just want to get a few things out of the way. If you don't really care, just skip to the timestamp for the first layer, and I just wanted to mention first of all what an iceberg chart is. Now it's been like 5-6 years since like the first types of those videos came out, but just for a little refresher, as everyone knows, an iceberg meme or an iceberg image is an image of an iceberg split into multiple sections, with sections at the top having info from franchises that are super well known, while at the bottom you'll have stuff that is just either really crackpot theories or just really obscure lore. So for example, like the first most popular iceberg, the Mario 64 iceberg, it has very simple stuff like L is real at the top, the whole Luigi conspiracy theory, while at the bottom it has stuff like every copy is personalized, which is like a conspiracy theory that says there's like an AI in the game that personalizes it. But you get the point of it. So if you like commentary videos that you can just put on in the background, I recommend putting this on. If you like Attack on Titan, that's even more. And I will say, if you haven't watched Attack on Titan or read it, and if you're not into it, I recommend watching the series first, because like straight off of the first tier we get into huge spoilers for a lot of plot twists. So I really recommend watching it. It's one of my favorite animes and mangas of all time, and even though the ending was kind of iffy, it's honestly like grown a lot on me ever since it came out, so I even like that now. So I recommend watching it all first, then coming back to this, because it'll add some nice little background to not only lore from the series, but the fandom and its many spin-offs, including games and whatnot. So yeah, that's going to be the intro. If you like the video, make sure to like. If you like my channel, subscribe, because I want to do more long-form commentary videos, whether it's these or game reviews. We'll see, because these take a fucking long time to make. Like, I started writing this script in like 2021, and now I'm finally actually getting to it. But that's more my laziness than anything else. So yeah, if you want to subscribe, it really helped the channel, and it make doing this maybe as a job something viable, which I don't really want to do now, but if I get enough traction, who knows, maybe I'll do that. So yeah, without any further ado, let's get into the first tier with the Attack on Titan Iceberg. Before I start the first tier, I just want to preface that this is not just one iceberg, but actually 4 icebergs. 3 taken word for word, and then a 4th one that I just kind of added extra stuff in towards the ending and the middle of, because I had some content that technically wasn't in the other icebergs. And as well as that, not all the icebergs have the same amount of layers, so I've moved some stuff to areas where I think they'd make more sense. So credit goes to u/goffers, u/pooty101, u/mediocreson, and the 4th user on Reddit who's deleted. But I have all of these original posts linked in the comments section, so if you want to go look at them on your own, obviously they're on screen right now. So yeah, let's get right into it. Season 1 and 2 gap. Now this refers to the obviously the gap between Season 1 and 2. It's a pretty popular, well-known thing in the fan base that Season 2 took a really long time to come out. In fact, it took 4 years to come out, and that's mainly because of the production schedule for Wit Studio taking a while, and of course the show just needing the amount of proper care that it deserves, because the show looks beautiful, everyone knows that. And while it's not mentioned in this entry, I also wanted to mention the fact that there's a huge gap between at least the release date of all the Season 4 content, with it coming out in like 4 parts, being like Season 3 Part 1, Season 3 Part 2, Season 3 Part 3 Part 1, and then Season 3 Part 2, or no, Season 3 Part 3 Part 2. And of course those final 2 parts being combined into a movie that also released in theaters, I think, only a few months ago from recording this. So yeah, that just mentions all the big time gaps and hiatuses between, releasing in the show. Now, I already know I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but Garen no Yumiya, which is the name of the first opening for Attack on Titan. Obviously, everyone knows it. It's not only just popular within the Attack on Titan fanbase, but within the anime fanbase, and even a little bit with the general public, as, it's a popular song. Everyone knows it. It's one of those openings like a lot of Dragon Ball's openings, or Silhouette from Naruto, where, like, if you hear it, you'd probably recognize it more often than not. So yeah, that just covers the first opening. Sasageo. Now this refers to 2 things. The first one, which goes in line with the last entry, is the second, or technically the 3rd opening, but the opening of the 2nd season for Attack on Titan, Shinzo wa Sasageo. And it also refers to a phrase which means dedicate your hearts, which is what the members of the Survey Corps say when they do their little salute. So not only is it an iconic opening, which is arguably even more popular than the first opening, but it's also a phrase used in universe. Eren x Mikasa. Now, this obviously refers to the ship between Eren and Mikasa. Before I explain that, I'm just going to explain the actual meaning of what a ship is. Now, ship is short for relationship, and a ship is when someone believes two fictional characters to be in a relationship, and either like draws fan art or writes fan fiction, or just makes theories about two characters who aren't in a relationship getting together. And obviously the most popular ship in Attack on Titan is Eren and Mikasa, because they're the main female and main male heroine. Of course they're going to be, headcanoned to being in a relationship. And of course for a while it was a headcanon, and a lot of people had evidence to disprove it, like Isayama saying that Mikasa was more of a mother figure to Eren. But towards the end of the show, spoilers obviously, go watch the show if you don't want to know, Mikasa literally kisses Eren's severed head. And Eren, of course, in some of his dying moments, admits to his best friend that he did love Mikasa and he doesn't want her to move on for 10 years at least. And while this seems controversial, especially to fans who don't like the ship, due to the fact that Eren and Mikasa are basically siblings even if they're not blood related, I still think it's a decent scene because at the end of the day, the characters in Attack on Titan are kids. Like, they were traumatized at a really young age, and then they joined the military at 15. And while they're 19 towards the story's end, they still are basically mentally teenagers. And then again, they've been heavily traumatized. They've been fighting a war that's just been continuously evolving and taking over their lives for the past 4 years. They've never had really any time to be kids or figure out their feelings. So of course someone like Eren, who not only had to do all that, but also found out that his whole life has been basically one railroad to his death because of Ymir and him kissing Historia's hand, of course he's going to freak out, and in his last moments tell his best friend that he really just wanted to be with the girl that he likes. And while it is a little cringe and it takes away from, a lot of the fan reception of Eren being this big Chad guy, I think it also works. And as someone who likes the whole Chad Eren meme, I think it also works for a character because they're just kids. So yeah, that's just an explanation of the Eren and Mikasa ship. And of course, I also forgot to mention that Eren literally gives Mikasa a vision of their life in a relationship. And he also basically confesses to her in Season 4 by asking her, "What am I to you?" And of course, we find out in Mikasa's vision that if she said, she liked him, they would have just ran away and lived together and not done the rumbling, and Eren would have died. So yeah, that's Eren x Mikasa. Levi is short. Now this obviously refers to just another simple meme based on the fact that Captain Levi is short. It's not really played on too much, especially towards the end of the story where things get serious, but early on people do mention it. And of course, it's just funny seeing art or, scenes in the anime where you'll see Captain Levi standing next to other characters and he's a lot shorter than they are. And to be specific, of course, he's 160 centimeters. Or in, freedom units, the best, way to measure things, he's 5'2". So yeah, a lot shorter than the average guy and pretty much about the height of the average woman, so yeah. Jean is a horse. Now obviously this is another classic meme from the fan base that refers to a scene where Eren says that Jean has a horse face very early on in the show. And of course this has been adopted into a meme saying that Jean is a horse, and to the most extremes and, subreddits or circles where people have a lot of brain rot, they'll just make memes where any horse in the background of a scene will be called John, which is really funny. Of course, John is a really good character in my opinion, but the horse meme is fucking hilarious, honestly. I love it. Even though it does kind of, it does age. It's one of those memes where it's, kind of unfunny after a certain amount of time, but I don't really interact with the AOT fan base that much, so anytime I see it, I get a little chuckle out of it personally. This sound effect, I wasn't really able to find much on this, but it is a sound effect that Mikasa makes in the scene where Eren reveals why Mikasa is so strong, and of course he reveals that Mikasa is a slave to his bloodline, or the royal family bloodline essentially. And I guess it's just funny because that's really Mikasa's only reaction to the scene, because she's just sitting there and Eren's talking about how she's basically a slave and how he hates her because he hates people who aren't free. And her reaction is just that. And then of course Armin throws hands and tries to fight Eren, but he gets his shit rocked. So yeah, that's really the only explanation I can come up with this. Maybe it's like a meme in other circles, or was a meme back when Season 3 was coming out. But that was so long ago, and kinda hard to research, that I wasn't able to find anything important. So if you know something, leave it in the comments. Commenting helps the video and it helps my channel, so I can actually turn this into a real job instead of having to go to college and do other things like a real person. But anyways, tangent aside, that's what this entry means. Let's fucking go. This is a meme that refers to, basically, it's just a meme where people put people saying "let's fucking go" over things like Aaron's Titan roaring when he transforms against the against Willy Tiber and the Warhammer Titan, as well as stuff like Aaron charging towards, you know, the Beast Titan in season 3. So yeah, pretty simple meme, honestly, not much to explain there. Flock was on the boat. Now, during Season 4, or during the Rumbling arc, right after the Marley arc, Aaron, obviously, he starts the Rumbling, and the Alliance forms to try and stop him. And they go to the port on Paradis, or Paradis, however you'd like to pronounce it, and they try and take a boat as well as a plane to get to Hizuru so they can fuel it up, and then try and stop, you know, the Rumbling. But Flock then appears with a bunch of Jaegerists and tries to shoot down the boat with a Thunder Spear, but he gets shot by Gabby and falls into the water. Now, people theorize that instead of just falling into the water and dying, Flock was actually on the boat to Hizuru. And it's, of course, confirmed like 2 chapters later that Flock, in fact, did survive. And then we see him trying to sabotage the plane one last time, which he does shoot, but they repair it just fast enough with Hanji's distraction. But he does end up getting shot in the process. And while his sacrifice was valiant, because the book bends over backwards to show us that the Rumbling was kind of the only option for permanent peace in Paradis, it is still sad seeing him die because, you know, he was a good guy. He really did believe in what he thought, and while it was sort of fascism, yet again, the book basically tells us that's the only right answer. Though, it's not just about objectives, as we see, you know, with people like Jean, their reasoning is more, not just objectively Paradis will be fine, they're more thinking, you can't just kill billions of people. You gotta at least try for peace. And while it doesn't work out in the end, it, you know, it is what it is. The characters are, you know, flawed at the end of the day. And while some people think it's dumb and they think Flock should have survived and that he was right, it's still a story. And honestly, I don't want to ramble too much about my opinions on the ending because they did change a lot. Like, back in the original script of this video, I literally said that Flock was right and I was going to go on a huge rant about it. But, you know, one of the things that I like about the fan base is this many perspectives, and one of the things that I want to see happen more is people kind of come around to the fact that the Alliance is wrong objectively, but the point isn't that they're wrong. The point is that they were trying to, you know, build hope for a better tomorrow that doesn't involve such a bloody solution, even if it basically was the real objective option as we see later. But that's just my take, and I don't want to ramble too much about the themes. I love this show, and I am passionate about talking about it, but I am kind of going on an aside. So, next entry. Potato Girl. Now, back on more lighthearted stuff, this refers to a classic scene in episode 3, or really early on in the manga, I forgot the exact chapter, where during the recruitment process, we see that Sasha is eating a potato, and she offers one to their instructor, you know, Commander Shadis. And obviously, she offers him half, but the joke is that it's not really half. And so he tells her to just run laps for the rest of the day till she literally collapses. And of course, the joke has then become that she is the potato girl. And of course, we see later on in the series that the writers embrace the joke. And obviously, you know, her whole, like, I wouldn't say her whole character. She is a good character, and she has a good arc in season 2. But the whole gag around her character is that she loves food. And we even see that later on with Niccolo, and how she loves his cooking because, you know, he has foreign cooking that she's never eaten before. And of course, people have even spun that into her being in love with him because he can cook. And of course, we know Niccolo loves her, but we never got confirmation that she loves him because, you know, she gets shot. But, you know, it is what it is. So yeah, that's the Potato Girl entry. Annie, Reiner, and Bertold in season 2. Now, this refers to the fact that if you look in the background of episode 2 during the opening, or well, not the opening, you know, song, but like the opening monologue, you'll see that Aaron, Reiner, and Bertold, not Aaron, Reiner, and Bertold, Annie, Reiner, and Bertold are in the background, and they, you know, they're just there, which is nice to see, obviously, and it's kind of a red herring because they're there looking at the Colossal Titan, when obviously, you know, they were the Colossal and Armored Titan, but it is nice to see that they're like put in just as sort of a red herring, even though their reveals of being actual traitors was super far out, with Annie's still being like a good 15, 16 episodes away. So it's just nice to know that the writers were planning far ahead, which is a running theme that you'll see with Isayama in a lot of his writing, which is, which comes from a lot of his inspirations, which we'll get to a lot later. And finally, rounding out the first layer is, what are the Titans? Now, what are the Titans exactly is still sort of a mystery, because we don't know what fully, controls the powers that made the Titans in the first place, but we do know a lot about them. Now, we know for a fact that the Titans originate from the founder, Ymir, who was a little slave raised by King Fritz from the Eldian tribe. And after letting some pigs go from a pen, the king gets really mad and he threatens to blind all of his slaves if they don't rat out who actually let the pigs go. So they rat out Ymir, and he sends his men to go hunt her down, literally hunt her with spears and shit like she's a dog. And while she's in the woods and injured from a spear, she finds a giant tree, and she goes in the tree and bonds with this little creature called a hallucinogenia, which is just this little, basically ancient worm thing that gives her powers to turn into a Titan. And from that, she would eventually, create the Eldian civilization, which, along with King Fritz, would take over a lot of other cultures and commit a ton of genocide, and basically rule the world, until Ymir was killed by a spear trying to save King Fritz. And then King Fritz would have Ymir's 3 daughters eat her remains, causing them to gain Titan powers. And from there, anyone who inherited the powers of those daughters would then inherit the powers of the 9. Now, it's still up in the air how 3 daughters formed into 9 Titans, but my personal theory that I saw in some fan art that I'll show on here if I can find it, is that basically each of the 3 daughters had a Titan that kind of has all the aspects of 3 of the Titans. So for example, one of the daughters might have had the Warhammer, the Attack Titan, and the Female Titan, with her kind of being more of a, I don't know, I guess a human Titan would be the best way to say it, or a Titan with the most human aspects, being able to use a weapon, having that will that the Attack Titan has, and of course, having a feminine appearance like the Female Titan, and having the ability to copy things, which is really the Female Titan's actual power, having its brain rather than other things. Though that's not really how it works, because you can move your brain in a Titan, but also, all Titan shifters can think once they gain control, but you get my point. So yeah, after that, the 9 Titans were established, and anyone who eventually was a descendant of Ymir, which would become the race Eldians, would have latent Titan powers that could be activated by the founder. Eventually, the Eldians lost a war due to one of their kings who was a pacifist, and he would take a bunch of his people and send them to the island of Paradis, where he would build the walls with a shit ton of founding Titans and cause a curse on the founding Titan powers that would basically make it so that anyone with royal power who had the founding Titan was not able to use it to activate the rumbling, or not activate the rumbling. They wouldn't be able to use it to use it for malicious purposes. I think actually it is to activate the rumbling. I'm stupid. But yeah, they use the powers to not be able to activate the rumbling. But of course, the king still threatens the world and says, if you go on Paradis, we'll activate the rumbling, as basically a diversion to save his race. And the rest of his race that were, on land and not on the island would basically become second-class citizens. Not even, maybe even third-class citizens. Because basically, even poor people we see, literally fucking hate Eldians. The racism is honestly insane. I understand racism, especially fictional racism, because there's stuff like X-Men, which covers it really well. But while Attack on Titan covers it well, of course, I love it, it is kind of it's insanely blown up. People fucking hate Eldians. It's insane if you actually watch the show. Basically every race agrees that they're all scum. And of course they believe that because they can turn into Titans, and of course because of what their race, or at least the king of their race, used to do. And so yeah, that's kind of the origin of the Titans. Now, mindless Titans that we see just in the background that are attacking a lot of people, those are obviously just random Eldians turned into Titans. And we actually do find out in Season 3 that those Titans, specifically the ones on Paradis Island, are people, or Eldians, who were taken from basically anywhere in the world and thrown onto Paradis as punishment for committing crimes and turned into Titans with the Titan Serum. And of course, the Titan Serum doesn't work on anyone who's not Eldian. So yeah, that pretty much answers the question, Titans are Eldians, just given the power to turn into Titans by either the founding Titan or just having one of the 9 Titans shifter powers. So that covers the tier 1 of the iceberg, and now we're going to move on to tier 2, the tip of the iceberg. Tier 2, the tip of the iceberg. r/Attack on Titan. Now, r/Attack on Titan is a subreddit, which, if you don't know what a subreddit is, Reddit is a platform where it's pretty much just like any other social media platform, but it's specifically focused on having its own like special little areas for each fan base or, community. So you can make these things called subreddits, which basically just form a little community based on any topic. There's things about dogs. You can have some about other cute animals. You can have things about animes, about shows, about mangas, about books. Like, there's really everything and anything. And of course, on Reddit, there is r/Attack on Titan. There's actually a few Attack on Titan subreddits. There's Attack on Titan, there's Shingeki no Kyojin, which is the Attack on Titan Japanese name, and I'm sorry if I've been mispronouncing it. I probably mispronounced Sasageyo early on too, but I just want to keep moving forward, so just correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Yet again, keep commenting. It boosts engagement. Anyways, there's also r/Titanfolk, which is actually a play on r/Freefolk, which is the Game of Thrones spoiler subreddit. And similarly, Titanfolk is the Attack on Titan spoiler subreddit. And then there's OK Buddy Reinertard, which is a, it's kind of hard to say this without, saying a slur, but basically there's what's the best way to put it? There's a little community, or not a community, but there's a sort of section of Reddit called like the OK Buddy subreddits based off of r/OK Buddy R slur, right? It's the one where you can make fun of, it's the slur that makes fun of mentally disabled people that starts with an R. I'm not going to say it in a YouTube video, but basically it's brain rot. It was brain rot before it was brain rot, and I don't even know what it looks like now. But if you want examples of like the stuff that's like on there, just look at the Arkham subreddit, which is also just extreme brain rot. And of course, OK Buddy Reinertard is that brain rot, but for the Attack on Titan franchise. And of course, there's other subreddits like that, like OK Buddy Rintard, which is the one for Fate, which I might actually make an iceberg on eventually, because I got into the series like a year ago because of my girlfriend, and I absolutely fucking love the Fate series. It's so good. But we're here to talk about Attack on Titan. So yeah, that covers that entry. AOT Junior High. Now, Attack on Titan Junior High, or AOT Junior High, is a spin-off manga and anime of Attack on Titan that is just kind of focused on comedy. It very loosely retells the story of Season 1, mainly the Trost arc, but with the characters being in junior high. And the whole joke is that instead of Eren wanting to kill Titans because they killed him, he wants to kill Titans because they're upperclassmen student who bullies him. And he doesn't want to kill them, he just wants to bully them back because they take his lunch, specifically his hamburg steak, which is a very long-running joke in the entire manga, at least for the first season. I haven't read much of the second season, which we will talk about later. And anyways, the manga then ends later with Eren plugging a hole in the principal's desks, who ended up being a Titan, freeing all the human characters from the Titan's tyranny, which is just bullying. Overall, it's a pretty fun series, and if you watch the show and you want to kind of watch something that's less of a downer than the OG, you can always watch Junior High right after to just cheer yourself up, especially because it's very short. It's only like 15-minute episodes, and there's only 12 of them. So yeah. Also, I should mention Junior High has a lot of foreshadowing for the current series, or at least the first 2, maybe 3 seasons of the original series, as characters like Frida shows up. Obviously, there's hints that Reiner, Annie. I keep calling Eren Annie, or Annie Eren, but Reiner, Annie, and Bertold, or Berturtle, or Bulbasaur, or Beethoven, or whatever the fuck you want to call them. That there's hints that they're Titans, obviously. So yeah, AOT Junior High. It's a pretty fun series. I recommend watching it. It's on Hulu and shit, so just watch it. But watch the original first too, because they're both peak. Manga. Now, this could refer to a lot of things, but I think it's just a reference to the fact that Attack on Titan, along with being an anime, and a very popular anime, is also just a very popular manga. A manga which I own a little bit of, actually, and I want to get more of, but I want to also save my money for better things, but I'll eventually finish that collection. But yeah, there's an Attack on Titan manga, as well as plenty of spin-off mangas, which I'll get into later on in the iceberg. Now, these next 2 entries actually go hand in hand, but the first one, of course, is Farmer Kun. Now, Farmer Coon refers to this random background character, right? Who Historia ends up marrying and giving birth to her child with. Now, all we know about him is that he was just a random farmer boy who used to bully Historia when she was younger. And she tells us this right before she says that she decides just to marry him and get pregnant by him to have a kid just so that she can have more time to not be forced to inherit a Titan. There's not really much to his character. He's just kind of in the background, and that's really it. He's just a random farmer boy. There's really nothing about him, besides a shit ton of memes for reasons that I'm going to bring up in the next entry. Eren is the father. Now, like I said in the last entry, obviously we know by the ending of the manga, at least it's pretty much 99% confirmed without a shadow of a doubt, that the random farmer boy is the father of Historia's child. But it used to be a popular theory around the time of the end of the manga that it would be revealed that Eren would be the farmer. And theories would go super far in, saying that like Eren would plant a Warhammer Titan capsule on Historia's farm, and that the ending of the Rumbling would be revealed that, or at the end of the Rumbling, it would be revealed that the big founding Titan didn't have Eren in it, and that he was still on Paradis, and that he'd come out of the crystal and help his, wife give birth. And, it's a whole thing. But the whole theory basically stems from the fact that a lot of people don't think that Farmer Coon being Historia's husband is really convincing. Because if you think about it, it really isn't. He's just a random guy who used to bully her when she was young. And a lot of people thought that Historia was really dumb for just making him, the father of her child, and they thought, no, it had to be Eren, it has to be someone else. And while that is true, especially given how smart Historia is, I think a lot of people overlook the fact that it's less about the choice of person, and it was more about the fact that Historia just wanted to get pregnant because it would give her more time, and also Eren more time, to plan a coup and also allow them to get access to Founding Titan powers and Zeke. So it's less about who is the father, and more just Historia trying not to be forced to eat anyone to get Titan powers, like Zeke's Beast Titan. So yeah, it is a fun theory, especially because, it is still a little dumb that she just picked the farmer out of anybody else. And, it would be more interesting if it was Eren. But it is what it is, and it could still be Eren's kid, because the manga just ends with Farmer Coon being there. Like, Historia, we see her talk to the farmer, and we see the farmer at the end, but, like, we don't see them fuck. So, in theory, the barn sex could have still happened, and Eren's could still be the father. But that's a really, really insane theory that would never come true. Unless it did. Levi x Petra. Now, this is another ship that ships Captain Levi with his squad mate Petra from the original Levi squad. Now, this ship is basically confirmed canon, at least on one side, as we see that towards the end of the Female Titan arc, after Petra dies and the scouts come back to Trost District, we see Petra's father, and she tells Levi, like, he asks him, like, oh my god, is she alive? Is she safe? And he basically tells Levi that she wrote a letter to him saying that she found this guy that she really liked and wanted to marry. And the hinting is basically that it's Levi, because, like, who else would she like? There are theories that she also liked, I'm not going to pronounce his name, it starts with an O. It's the guy who, like, bites his tongue. There's going to be an image on screen of him. But people say that she likes him as well, because, there's obviously jokes in the show that says they argue like an old married couple. But, obviously, Levi's the more popular ship because he's, like, the most popular character in the show and people find him attractive, Two hot people, of course they're going to be together, and of course fans want them together. And while we don't know Levi's thoughts on this, he could have liked her, but he also could have just been sad when he heard her father, because Levi cares about his troops, he cares about his people. And especially people in Levi's squad who he handpicked, he'd care about more because they were his close friends, and that would remind him of losing his friends in his backstory OVA, which we'll get onto later. Now, speaking of Levi's backstory OVA, this entry is No Regrets. Now, No Regrets is a OVA, or just a spin-off manga, that basically covers Levi's backstory. We basically find out that Levi lived in this underground city in Valsita, and when he lived down there, he had ODM gear, and him and his best friend would basically steal stuff from scouts and merchants and other people to live. And they were trying to save up money so that they can buy a pass to go to the above ground, because living underground obviously sucks, you don't have vitamin D. And the explanation that the show gives is that living underground without proper sunlight makes it so that people will become eventually paralyzed and not allowed to use, or not allowed, but not able to use their legs because of the lack of vitamin D. And so Levi, due to that happening to his mom, decides that he wants out. Eventually, while he's thieving around, he meets this little girl. Or not little girl, she's like younger than them, but she's not like a little girl. She's like a teenager. But if like Levi and Co were like 16 or so, she'd be like 14 or so. Probably. I don't remember their ages right off, the top of my head. But Levi meets this girl, and him, his friend, and this girl, they all become friends, and they keep stealing. And eventually they're caught by the scout regiment. And the scouts basically say that they're either going to go to jail or they're going to join the scouts. And so Levi joins the scouts, and we find out that this is actually part of a mission from Levi to retrieve some documents from Commander Erwin on an expedition and assassinate him. And if, Levi does that, he'll be able to get his freedom outside of the underground city. So Levi trains, he becomes really good because he's that guy. He's like that. And him and his friends are also really good. And they go on a scouting expedition, and when it gets really foggy and rainy out, he loses track of his squad members after trying to go ahead and find Aaron. And when he comes back, he ends up finding that his friends were massacred by a really powerful Titan with red eyes. We don't really know much about it. We just know that it was powerful and was able to wipe out a squad. And so Levi goes rage mode. He kills the Titan. He screams, and then Erwin shows up. And Erwin also reveals that he knew that Levi was trying to assassinate him, but he still gives Levi a chance. And Levi decides to give his loyalties to the scout regiment instead of killing Erwin basically there, because he was surrounded by other scouts. He couldn't really do anything. And also he just decided to give his loyalty to Erwin because he saw Erwin as a good person, and his friends were gone, so he decided to give himself something to fight for rather than fighting for the dream that he thought died with his friends. So yeah, I'd say No Regrets is a really good OVA. I personally even choose to watch it before I watch the show, but that's because I'm weird. I have a really weird watch order where I'll watch No Regrets, I'll watch Ilse's Notebook, and then I'll watch some of the training OVAs in between episode 4 and 5. It's a whole weird thing with me, but it is a fun way to watch the show because it extends the early game of it, so it doesn't just kind of go off the rails immediately. But that's up to you. What is in the basement? Now this refers to basically the central mystery of the first 3 seasons that basically is just the question of what is in Grisha Yeager's basement. Now this all stems from the first episode, where before Grisha goes off to Walsina to do a house call with one of his richer clients, though we later find out that it's just him going to kill the Rice family and get the founding Titan, we hear that Grisha is basically going to tell Eren what's in his basement. And of course, later in season 3, so later in the show and the manga, we find out what's in the basement when they retake Shiganshina, and we find out that it is Grisha's notebooks and records of the history of the world outside of the walls. And of course, the rest of the scouts discover this and share this with the rest of the walls, causing them to want to obviously become diplomatic and make connections on the outside and just try and fix the Aldean name, which is basically the whole character's arcs for like the middle section of the Marley arc. I would say the early part of it, but we only see that in like flashbacks towards the middle section of the arc right before the rumbling starts, which I guess is more towards the end if you really want to count it like that, but that doesn't matter too much. So yeah, that's really just the mystery of the basement. Another thing that I want to mention, because it's not mentioned on the Iceberg, but there's also a theory, and it's one of my personal theories, that Grisha would have had Eren eat him then and there if he actually did come back to Shiganshina before he got attacked, because we know that Grisha was sort of nearing the end of his lifespan. So it's a theory that it was Grisha's plan to bring Eren to the basement, show him about all the shit that happened, tell him about the outside world, and then eventually take him out, probably to some forest or whatever, and have him eat Grisha so that he can obtain his powers and inherit his mission to stop Marley. Anime onlys. Now this is less of an Attack on Titan thing and more of just a thing with anime fan bases, but anime onlys obviously refers to people who only watch the anime and haven't read the manga of a certain property. Obviously this doesn't happen with everything, because some shows are just animes, like Evangelion originally was just an anime and then the manga came later. But with Attack on Titan, obviously the manga came out first and then the anime came out later. So yeah, there are people who are just anime onlys, and I believe Attack on Titan, or r/Attack on Titan, is the subreddit specifically for anime onlys, or at least it just covered anime stuff. So if you posted like manga stuff, it'd get deleted. But I'm not entirely sure. I don't use Reddit that much, so I don't check that. And especially with the Attack on Titan fan base, since the show's over and it's kind of dead. It's been a while since I've checked it. Editor saved Sasha. Now this refers to an event where allegedly during the writing of the season 2 arc, or I forgot the name of the arc actually, but you know, the arc in season 2, in the early parts it was originally gonna happen that Sasha would get killed when she was saving that kid when she was alone, but apparently the editor that Isayama had at the time cried on his knees and begged Isayama to not kill Sasha, so it would make Isayama basically postpone her death. And obviously it didn't save her permanently because she would die 2 seasons later, or like 3-4 arcs later. But hey, we got more screen time from Sasha, and we got stuff like her friendship with Niccolo, and we got good scenes of her just in general. You know, she's a fun character, everyone loves her. And it's nice to see that, you know, someone on the writing team did have a say to try and save characters that we like. Especially because, you know, a lot of early characters died a lot in those first few seasons. Corduroy. Now this is an entry I think should probably be deeper, but it is really high up on the iceberg, so I put it here. Now Corduroy, if you're wondering, is a fictional drug. It's basically like heroin or whatever, or crack. It's just it's basically a tablet of white shit. It's just perks basically. It's Percocet, and it's sold by Carly Stratman in the manga, you know, Lost Girls, or specifically Walsina Goodbye, which is the Lost Girls manga that covers Annie's story of how she was able to get covered for, you know, very fun vacation and time off that she did during the Female Titan arc. And we see Carly sell the Corduroy, and that's really about it. It's just a fake drug. There's nothing really to it besides the fact that it exists. And it is kind of cool that this universe has its own fake drugs. It probably has fake diseases as well, but they don't really go too much into it. But it is a nice bit of world building. World map. Now, we don't really know much about the world map of Attack on Titan, but during the Marley arc, we actually do see a small panel, and of course, in the anime and in the manga we see this, where we see an incomplete drawing of the world map. And from what we see, it's just a very obviously flipped map of the actual Earth, with Marley being somewhere in what would be South Africa in real life, and not the country, just the southern part of Africa. And Paradis basically takes the place of Madagascar. And that becomes its own very funny crackpot theory later on that I'll get into. But I would mention first that, you know, obviously the Earth map, at least from what people theorize, is probably just the rest of the globe flipped, which does make sense since we know that, you know, Marley and Paradis are just a flipped version of Africa. So, you know, it would make sense that the rest of the world is flipped. And speaking on that, there was another entry that I removed that I'm just gonna put into here. But they also mentioned that there's a theory that Hizuru is actually, instead of being where Japan would be in normal real life, instead it's just on where Australia would be. And we don't really know because we don't see a map of Hizuru, or we don't see it in relation to, you know, the world map that we see. But it is a fun theory to think, because, you know, countries are relatively large. Like, Marley is huge, and we only see a small part of it, but if the world map that we see is true, then Marley's a huge country. It takes up like a shit ton of what would be modern day Africa, and that's the biggest continent in the world. And of course Paradis is also a huge fucking island. I mean, even though it's in basically what would be Africa, which what you think would be tropical, there's a lot of snow, there's a ton of different geography. Like, apparently there's deserts too in Paradis. So yeah, I mean, the Attack on Titan world is just interesting in general if you really get into it. But really, the most we know about the entire like map of the world is just from that one panel. And I think it is interesting, and it's a fun little bit of world building. Alright, now we're on to tier 3 of the iceberg, and the first entry here is AOT X advertisements. Now this is just pretty simple. There's just a shit ton of ads involving either AOT characters or AOT sponsored products, and that's obviously because Attack on Titan's a really popular franchise, so of course it's going to have crossovers. I could be here all day and explain a lot of the ads, but it's really just kind of a waste of time. I mean, some of them are really silly, so if you want to look them up, you can. And I do recommend it, because you might get a good laugh out of them. But it's simple, you know, AOT is a popular show, so it's going to get sponsored, and there's going to be ads with characters or featuring characters drinking or eating, you know, whatever stuff they're trying to advertise. Monster Hunter. Now, Monster Hunter is a very popular series by Capcom of action games based around, you guessed it, hunting monsters and skinning them alive, and then hunting more monsters wearing the skin of the monster you just skinned. It's a very fun franchise. I love it personally, And of course, Monster Hunter is known for crossing over with many franchises, you know, like Mega Man or Street Fighter, you know, very popular Capcom franchises, along with other franchises like Mario, Zelda, and Sonic. But in addition to that, Monster Hunter also crosses over with animes. And a lot of the anime crossovers in Monster Hunter was specifically located in the game Monster Hunter Frontier or Monster Hunter Frontier G, or you know, whatever you want to call it, because there's so many names for Frontier. I mean, I could do a whole video on just Frontier stuff, even, but I'll do that later probably, because I actually do love Monster Hunter a lot. But in 2011, Monster Hunter Frontier got a collab set with Attack on Titan, having an armor set based off the trainee outfits, the garrison outfits, and the scout outfits. Along with that, they had the ODM gear swords as dual blades, and they had a sword and shield set, which was one of the ODM gear swords and a shield which would have either a scout emblem or a garrison emblem. So yeah, a pretty fun collab overall. Unfortunately, it didn't have like a goofy collab monster, which would be like a reskin monster with collab stuff, like, you know, Evangelion had, or it just didn't have an original monster like, you know, World had with the Behemoth or the Lechin, which we fucking hate. But, you know, it is just neat to see stuff like that in Monster Hunter, especially in the older games. Though, even though you can't, like, put it on because they're kind of useless since there's way better armor in the game, I still find it nice. Though I wish there were stuff like, you know, layered armor back in those early games. Especially GU, just random side tangent, because I love Monster Hunter GU. It is a long-ass game, though. Like, I'm 60 hours in and I'm just barely done with high rank on Hub. But the one thing I wish they did was add fucking layered armor super early. Like, I feel bad for Frontier fans, because there's so much shit, like, you know, the Attack on Titan collab, and there's stuff like Evangelion, there's plenty of other animes. I think there's a Baki collab in there too. I know there's one in GU, but a lot of the earlier games, there's no layered armor, so most collab armor is just kinda actually fucking useless and not good, because it either is really low leveled or it just doesn't have good skills, so you can't really wear it without just actively nerfing yourself. And it's especially true for the AOT armor, because this was added in Frontier's G, and that was a very, very early part of Frontier. It's not too early, like, obviously there was early high rank Frontier, so this is still G rank, but the armor got power crept a lot, so it's kind of useless nowadays. But it is just a fun little thing, so if you do want to put on the armor and be a scout for a mission and get your back blown out by a Zenith Zinogre or something, you know, you can do that. Anyways, let me not go on a tangent about Monster Hunter. This could be a later video and not just this. Hating Gabby. Now this refers to the fact that a lot of people in the fan base, even to this day, unironically, like, I was actually looking at Instagram Reels probably like 3-4 days ago, by the time I'm recording this. I actually saw a reel talking about how people still hate Gabby, and people in the comments were agreeing. But this refers to the fact that a lot of people don't like the character of Gabby, mainly because she shot Sasha, and a lot of people love Sasha. It makes sense. Like, if someone's gonna kill a main character, they're not gonna be the most popular character. But I think a lot of people just kind of forget the context of it. Like, Sasha and the rest of the scouts literally showed up, and I was gonna say practically, but no, they literally nuked the entirety of the Marley army, and of course Gabby was part of that. And while of course Marley is in the wrong and they even, you know, oppress her people, she's still a kid, and while she doesn't necessarily like Marley, you know, she still views the people on Paradis as worse Eldians than her. And so of course she is very merciless when it comes to killing them, so she sneaks on the airship and she kills Sasha as revenge for, you know, fucking over her family and the army and her chances of being able to get the Armor Titan. So it makes sense within character, and of course, if you actually, you know, continue reading and watching the show, you'll know that she obviously changes and realizes that not all people from Paradis are devils, and in fact, they're just people. And they were only doing things because her country wronged them first. And while you could go into the whole cycle of violence, which is a very popular theme in the show, which I'll get into later, you know, at the end of the day, it's just a sad situation all around. I think people hating on Gabby are doing way too much. Like, she's just a kid brainwashed by propaganda. And, you know, after it getting essentially proven right to her, she takes action. And she does later regret it. I don't think she regrets specifically killing Sasha, but she does regret doing all the shit that she does. And she, you know, eventually helps in trying to save Marley. And eventually just tries to help make the world a better place because, you know, she realizes the error of her ways there. And of course, people just want to move past this and be like, oh, but she killed Sasha, so we hate her. And I think it's a little childish, but you can't really control people's opinions. You just have to kind of let it happen. But that's my personal take on Gabby. And so yeah, of course, a lot of people hate her because she killed a popular character, but it's kind of unfounded. So it is what it is. IMDb scores. This obviously refers to the fact that Hero and Perfect Game, at least for a while, were number 1 and number 2 as the top TV episodes on IMDb. Of course, they moved down a little bit now, but on the top TV episodes, especially in the top 100, top 250, you'll actually find quite a few Attack on Titan episodes, which is obviously emblematic of how great the series is. Of course, number 1 now is Ozymandias from Breaking Bad, and honestly, I'd say it deserves it. I wouldn't say it's the best episode of Breaking Bad in my opinion, though it's been a minute since I've seen it, but it's a spectacular episode. I love Breaking Bad as much as I love Attack on Titan. I probably like AOT a little more though, because I'm more nostalgic for it, but you know, the top TV episodes is a great list. I mean, it has just banger episodes after bangers. You know, it has stuff from Clone Wars, it has stuff from Attack on Titan, it has Breaking Bad, it has Better Call Saul. Like, it has a lot of shit that people like because they're really good episodes. And Attack on Titan not only held the number 1 and number 2 spots for a while, but it still holds, I'm pretty sure, a few spots within the top 10, as well as spots within the top 50 and top 100, because it's a great show. So, obviously, it's gonna get its recognition from critics. Attack on Titan video games. Now, Attack on Titan, as a popular anime franchise, of course has video games. Though, unlike pretty much every other popular anime franchise, it's not a shitty arena fighter like, you know, My Hero, or One Punch Man, or Demon Slayer, because it's kinda, you know, ass. But, yeah, there's 3 official Attack on Titan games. That being Attack on Titan Humanity in Chains for the 3DS, which is actually kinda bad. Attack on Titan Wings of Freedom for stuff like the PS4 and the Xbox One. And of course, Attack on Titan 2, which is on PC, Switch, PS4, Xbox One, and of course, it's on the upgraded consoles, the One X, the Series S, and the Series X, and the PS5, because, you know, those are backwards compatible. Not really the PS5, but it does actually let you play PS4 games, so it is backwards compatible, with just that one console at least. And yeah, of course, AOT 2 also has its story expansion, Final Battle, which covers the first and second arc of Season 3, as well as adding a few costumes and some extra modes. Now, personally, I haven't played Humanity in Chains, but people don't like it as much, because obviously it's a 3DS game. Like, movement like the ODM gear just isn't built for the 3DS, so of course it's not going to have as good reviews as the other 2 games, which are Attack on Titan Wings of Freedom and Humanity in Chains. I mean Attack on Titan 2. I own both of those games for Xbox One, and I personally love them both. They're really fun. The movement is great. The combat is fun. The story is alright. The first game is just the story of Season 1, with a little bit of Season 2 content, but in like its own weird non-canon way. Like, there's a post-game story about the Beast Titan, but it is completely different from Season 2. And then, of course, Attack on Titan 2 is Season 1 and Season 2, with Season 3 covered in. But it is told in a slightly different way, at least for the first 2 seasons, as Season 3 was an expansion, and it just covers the story, like, straight up in the most normal way it possibly can. But Season 1 and 2 is covered in a more interesting way, which I'll get into later in the Iceberg. And if you want to buy these games, I recommend it. They're really fun. And of course, they're the only official Attack on Titan games, but they get them right. They get them right, like, instantly. And of course, Koei Tecmo designed them, so you already know they're going to be pretty fun hack and slash games at the least. And while they don't have the most amount of death, they're still pretty fun. And AOT 2 has its own post-game mode called Conquest, or, it's Conquest or, like, Territory Expansion Mode, that's the name. Territory Expansion Mode, which is, a mode where, it's just an arcade mode where you gain territory outside the walls. And it technically is part of the game's story, making the game non-canon, of course. But it's just a story where a bunch of characters make their own regiment, which get picked out of the characters you've already unlocked. And you get to just expand your territory and just do little mini missions, fight titans, you know, all the good stuff about an Attack on Titan game. And it's essentially infinite, so there is stuff to do. It's actually a really fun game. I definitely recommend buying them if you can. They're on all modern consoles and PC, so you shouldn't really have a problem getting them, especially since they're on last gen like Xbox One and PS4, and especially since they run good on old consoles too. But let me stop glazing these games because, you know, we have to move on to other entries. Based flock. Now, I might have touched on this earlier when I mentioned the flock on the boat entry, and of course this just follows up with it, with based flock being sort of flock's fan reputation, as fans are pretty much very polarizing with flock. There's a lot of fans, mostly anime onlys or people who enjoyed the ending when it came out, who hate flock, and then there's people who hated the ending, who love Flock and of course view him as, King Flock, the Chad, who was the person who was really right all along. And of course that plays into it. It's more of like a 4chan type of thing, calling him based, having him with the Giga Chad image. And it is sort of right, because Flock does end up being right, as Paradis does not achieve permanent peace and it gets bombed even if it is like 200 years later. But, it's more just the fan perception of him. I think recently it's calmed down, as I've seen a few posts on Titanfolk of all places actually talking about how Flock isn't really that based and kind of a fraud, which is funny because Titanfolk used to love Flock back around the time the ending came out. But obviously that might have just been with time, because the ending came out years ago. Even with the anime, even though that came out like a few years after the manga ending, it's still been quite a while. So of course fan perception is gonna cool, people are gonna warm to it. Like B, I hated the ending at first, but now I think it's alright. Damn near good actually. Because honestly, it's not even that bad. But yeah, that's just what base Flock means. I don't know how to pronounce that, but Eren and Historia. This is basically just another ship, and the second most popular ship in the show, or maybe third most popular. It depends on what your view is, but we'll get to that ship later on, probably. But Hisu, or Eren plus Historia, is just a ship between Eren and Historia. And this came a lot, especially from Season 3, which had material with them spending an actual amount of time together. And of course, people love it, It's one of, if not the best girl characters in the show, and the main male character. And of course, this would lead on to people thinking that, Historia would give birth to Eren's child. And of course, there's theories later on what that child could be, considering it's a combination of royal blood and the founding and Attack Titan, which would be OP if you think about it. Because the Attack Titan is already OP as fuck with its abilities and its foresight, and it being able to send memories. But that's for a later entry. So yeah, that's what Hisu means. OVAs. Now, OVA basically means original video animation, which is just shorthand for an extra episode, basically. Now, a lot of animes have OVAs, and Attack on Titan, of course, has quite a few that we'll be going over right now. The first few being Ilse's Notebook, which is just a small short story about a scout regiment girl who was on a mission and found a Titan that was able to talk to her and called her Ymir, and after eating her, he basically put her body in a tree and would worship it as a shrine. And of course, we'd see this through the perspective of her writing it in a notebook, and that notebook eventually being found by Hanji and Levi. And also, this kind of gives us the backstory of Sonny and Bean, or at least some of the captured Titans that Hanji had. We don't know if there's, I don't remember if there's Sonny and Bean specifically, but we do know these are like the first Titans that Hanji has captured to experiment on. The next OVAs are, I believe there's 2 or 3 of them, I forgot exactly specifically, I think there's 2. But these ones take place between episode 4 and 5 during the training period for, our main characters, where basically one covers everyone going into Trost District and John getting in a cook-off with Sasha, and then eventually ending with John making a little omelet that his mom made that impresses Commander Pixis to the point where he makes them the winner, and then John makes up with his mom or whatever because he was mean to her. Just another lighthearted filler story. And the other one covers basically the scouts doing training and eventually having their base get robbed from their I can't speak today. The scouts doing training and their ODM gear gets robbed and Historia gets kidnapped. So the scouts have to all, band together and take down these robbers without their ODM gear. And they all become closer because of it. And I just noticed I've been saying scouts, but they're all trainees still. But you get my point. It's just the new Levi Squad, if you want to call them that, even though they're not even close to being Levi Squad, but they all become Levi Squad later in the story. And then the final few OVAs are the Lost Girls OVAs, which I'll get to in a few more entries. Alright, and the next entry is Peak's Golden Ratio. Now this one's more of a meme entry, but basically the Golden Ratio is this sort of spiral image that basically is just the golden ratio for proportions or objects or whatever. It's not too much, there's not like a lot of lore about it, but basically the joke is that Peak's ass when she's on all fours is the golden ratio, because of course in the manga and in the show we get a few shots of Peak's ass when she's on all fours, and this became a meme that, oh, Peak has a really nice ass, because they zoom into it a lot. And of course this became especially popular because Attack on Titan doesn't really have fan service like a lot of animes, which is, in my opinion, what makes it good. Like, It's just one of that shows that like actually focuses on the story instead of going into fan service and just trying to be more for like a horny audience. Though of course these jokes are part of that, but there's only really a few in the show, and Peak is overall taken as a serious character. Though there is one other piece of fan service that I thought I'd mention, because I forgot to mention this in any Iceberg entry, even though I should have put my own entries in. But basically, it was said once by Isayama that he didn't like including fan service in his manga, but the one time he did include fan service, according to him, was with Historia as a character, or at least when she was Krista. And he basically said that her being a happy character who doesn't really have a tragic backstory is his way of having fan service. Because the show, especially in the earlier seasons, used to be very dark with a lot of characters dying all the time. So his idea of fan service was just a nice, happy character. And of course, this would get broken almost a season later, with season 2 having Historia get her arc with Ymir, and Ymir dying, and her being sad about that. And then of course, season 3 giving her a lot more of a complex role as a character. And season 4 even having her do stuff like get herself pregnant just so she can prolong having to kill people, like Zeke, so that she can gain Titan powers. But, back in the day, Historia used to be fan service just because she was a happy person. And I thought I'd add that tidbit in because it's really fucking funny if you think about it. Lost Girls. Now, these are the other OVAs that I was just talking about an entry ago. And these are basically OVAs that cover, or at least feature, Annie and Mikasa as the main characters. The Annie OVAs is a two-parter that basically cover how Annie was able to get Hitch to cover for her in Walsina while she was going out and killing scouts and, spinning them around like fucking yo-yos during the female Titan expedition. And we see that she just basically goes on a bunch of errands, helps the people out, and she eventually, covers the whole Kodoran thing, which I mentioned earlier. And then, of course, the one focusing on Mikasa is actually an alternate timeline where Mikasa's parents were actually alive, and we end up seeing how this influences Mikasa, with Mikasa eventually moving to Shiganshina with their parents just to be closer to Grisha. And eventually we see Eren basically... we don't see... Hold up. The best way to put it is that we see Eren and Mikasa become friends, and of course her meet Armin because, she still moves. And we see later that Eren and Armin basically kill themselves because they decide to make a balloon to go over the wall, but the balloon catches on fire and it blows up. And this OVA has a lot of foreshadowing and hinting at Mikasa's true role in the story. And I think it's kind of ignored because, especially with a lot of sort of the fan base that doesn't like the ending, they try to ignore Mikasa's development. And while it is very little, she does have a lot of subtle stuff going for her. And I think this OVA specifically has a lot of foreshadowing and hinting at what Mikasa really is supposed to represent and what her role in the story is, as well as just a lot of insight on her character in general and her whole tragic fate with Eren. And it shows how no matter in what timeline, she's still going to have to basically get over Eren, with Eren dying because of his own impulsiveness. Now, whether it was the rumbling or going in a balloon with Armin, he still ends up, dying young, which is really sad. And of course, I just think the OVA is really interesting, and it has a scene with a magician where he shows Mikasa her future or whatever, and that of course is very foreshadowing heavy. And it actually kind of reminds me a lot about how a lot of people say that Isayama was able to foreshadow, because one of the main things about this manga is that it's really good at foreshadowing. But a lot of people tend to forget that even stuff like Mikasa being destined to kill Eren or be responsible for Eren's death was foreshadowing, because they also basically say that Mikasa was responsible because she wasn't able to get to Eren in time because she was stopped by the magician in the middle of some fucking fair in Shiganshina. But yeah, let me not yap too much because this really has no substance. I'm just kind of saying shit. But yeah, that's the Lost Girls OVAs, which also covered the last few OVAs for Attack on Titan. /SNK/ Now, I don't really know what this means actually, and I'm not able to research it either, and no one in the actual Iceberg comments on Reddit were able to mention it either, so if you know what this means, please bring it up. I know SNK is obviously the initials, or, it's an acronym for Shingeki no Kyojin, sorry for the mispronunciation, which is the Japanese name of the show, but I don't really know what it means in the context of this Iceberg, so if anybody knows, please comment down below, because I'm actually really curious on this one. Zeke's ass wiping technique. Now, this is a meme in r/OK buddy Reiner, which basically just questions how Zeke is able to wipe his ass, and there's really nothing about it. It's just a dumb meme because, of course, uh, you know, it's okay buddy Reiner. The whole point of that subreddit is that it's brain rot dumb memes. Like, there's another popular meme from the Reddit actually, where it's just an image of Reiner that says "I want to kill myself," and it's really fucking funny to me for no reason. And obviously the joke is that, Reiner does actually want to kill himself because he tries to blow his brains out with a shotgun because of his PTSD and his possible multiple personality disorder, which is actually kind of fucked up if you think about it. But I mean, it is a show at the end of the day, so it's not like meant with malice or anything. They are fictional characters, though it is a little dark, but it, surprisingly actually fits in line with the show, which is just that dark in some points. Armin is the narrator. Now, this refers to the theory that basically it says it in the title that Armin is the narrator, but it also refers to the fact that people theorize that Armin's narration isn't just narration for the audience, but also narration of him telling the story of what happened within the walls and the whole story of the anime to someone, probably his kids in the future. And obviously him being the narrator isn't really confirmed. I mean, it is his voice actor, but it's not like 100%. But you could actually say that this theory is true because in the ending of the manga, especially the original ending, we see that the Alliance basically meet up after the rumbling and go try to talk to the remaining inhabitants of the world to convince them that Paradis is innocent and that they shouldn't be bombed. And while that works for a time until they are bombed, people theorize, or at least I personally theorize, that this could be a reframing of Armin's narration, and it's basically him telling the rest of the world about how Paradis was, from him explaining the walls, and it would even explain some of the classified information, eye catchers that we see during commercial breaks. This would be actual documents of him showing how, the government or how stuff like Iceberg Steel exists. It's just Armin showing people and the world basically what happened in Paradis, how it works, how they view things. He's just trying to convince them to not nuke us, or I guess bomb us, whatever they can do, because there aren't really nukes in the Attack on Titan world. At least that nukes that aren't Armin or Bertold, which they can't do either of that because they're both, well, Bertold's dead and Armin doesn't have Titan powers by that time. But you get my point. So yeah, that's really the theory about Armin being the narrator. Now here's another Armin focused theory, and this one is about Bert's influence. Now, I don't know if this theory came out before or after season 4, or before or after the Marley arc, but in the Marley arc, we actually do hear from Eren telling Armin that he believes that Bertold is actually influencing Armin to do stuff like, care for Annie's Titan Crystal, or try to be, more, what's the best word? To be sympathetic to Marley. And while we don't know if this is true or not, or if this is just Eren telling Armin to fuck with him, it is possible that Titan shifters can influence their inheritors or be influenced by their predecessors, because we do know for a fact the Founding Titan, or not the Founding Titan, the Attack on Titan's the Attack on Titan, I'm gonna kill myself, that's awful. The Attack Titan's whole gimmick is that it's able to send memories back from the past and present to influence its current users. Though we don't know if this is really true or not, because of course, it could just be Eren telling Armin that. And we know for a fact that the whole sending memories thing is just an Attack Titan exclusive thing. So it could just be Bertold subconsciously influencing him, or it could just be Armin liking Annie, because we know at least they like each other and they admit it towards the ending, which is another ship that may or may not be mentioned. I forgot if it is. So if it isn't, Eren X Armin is, not Eren X Armin. That's also a thing. We love Yaoi, but also Annie X Armin is a thing. But yeah, it's just another small detail that may or may not be true, but doesn't really have too much bearing on the overall story. AOT fan game. Now, another entry based on Attack on Titan games. This refers to, this could be a few things actually, but first and foremost, this refers to Rourke's AOT fan game, which is an Attack on Titan fan game, where instead of fighting Titans, it's actually more focused on PvP, so you'll be able to zip around with ODM gear and fight other people. It has 3 weapon classes, so it has the swords, obviously, it has the anti-personal gear, or the guns, and the thunder spheres. And obviously with swords, you have to dash at your enemy or throw your swords to pick them off in the air. With the guns, you can just shoot them. And with the Thunder Spears, you can either blow them up in your explosion, or a really fun thing that I actually like is that you can just spear them. Now, I'll be showing some gameplay later on in this video because I recorded some specifically for this. Thank God the game's still alive, because it died a while, like a little before I actually wrote this script. But now that I'm finally recording it all these years later, the game's actually somewhat alive, even if it is very low player lobbies. But it's a fun game, so if you ever want to hop on, play it and shit so I can play with you. My name is, I think Helix in the game. I might have changed it. But, I play a lot, at least when I can, when people are online. And it's fun. I think it has good movement, especially with the ODM gear. And honestly, you could even argue that it has better movement than the actual official Attack on Titan games. But that's really up to your own discretion because, both games have great movement, and both games' movement is tailored around different things. This game is for PvP, and the official games are for taking out actual Titans. Of course, you do PvP, or at least PvE, but against a person, a human being, in the Final Battle DLC, but it is actually really clunky, so maybe they should adopt more of this if they ever plan on doing a third Attack on Titan game that covers the rest of the show. And anyways, the other thing that this entry could be covering is also just fan games in general, because I don't think there's any other really major fan games that are built from the ground up, but there are quite a few Roblox games that, obviously have Attack on Titan stuff, whether they're just, Attack on Titan character morphing games or something. I don't know if those are even still a thing because I don't play Roblox. But there's also games where you can just run around the city and kill Titans. So yeah, that's the Attack on Titan fan game entry. Original ending. Now this entry could actually be referring to a lot of things. Now, first of all, I think what this thing is referring to is the original, or not original, but the leaked ending panel, which was an image that allegedly was a panel of the original ending, which was a panel with a man and a woman holding a baby, which some people thought were Eren and Mikasa, or not Eren and Mikasa, but Eren and Historia holding their baby. Though this panel was actually later used in the original ending, but it was of course Grisha and Carla holding Eren. But also, as well as that, this could just be referring to the fact that Attack on Titan's ending might have changed in the process of being written. Now, while this is possible, as writers do tend to change their things while they're writing, this also is something that I don't think is true, because Isayama is known for his heavy foreshadowing, not only in his main projects or continuities, but also in other stuff like Junior High and Attack on Titan High School, and of course High School Cast, which later comes on. And also, a lot of the foreshadowing stuff is really early too. Like in Lost Girls, you have a lot of Mikasa's foreshadowing, as well as her representation as a butterfly, and her whole thing about being doomed to watch Eren die. Like, the foreshadowing is very thick to the point where I feel like Attack on Titan's ending might have just been that, and there wasn't really much. Because we do see that, after the original ending came out with the manga, Isayama came back and he added the extra pages, and some people thought, oh, they were going to change the ending. But it really didn't change things that much. It just changed it from it ending where the Alliance goes to try and save the world, to us seeing that eventually the world would come back. And while that ending does kind of change the meaning, of course, it does, I think, work better in my opinion, because it goes from the story just being, oh, the Alliance was just 100% right, they're hopeful, to the ending being more complex, with it being, the Alliance did eventually help Paradis for a little bit, but, the whole cycle of violence came back, Paradis gets bombed, and then boom, the Titans come back. And I think that's great because it makes the story more complex, because while it does show that the Alliance was right, it also shows that the Jaegerists were right. Both are sort of right at the same time. The Alliance was able to get peaced, at least for a while, at least for as long as they lived. But eventually, violence can't be stopped, and a good thing about that is that it shows that the ending is sort of ambiguous, because we don't know what actually caused Paradis to get bombed again. It could have been revenge for the Rumbling, it probably was, considering it killed billions of people, but it's never explicitly stated, it's just images. We just see that Paradis does get bombed. Some people, there's actually a theory that it was a civil war, from the Jaegerists being a bad faction or something, but we'll never know. But I actually do like the fact that it's like that. And, of course, we'll never know if there actually was an original ending before this, or even the full ending that we got with just, the Alliance going out to talk to the world. So, we'll never know. We do know that leaked panel is fake, though, unfortunately. But whether or not you like the ending or not, I think it's safe to say that due to a lot of the foreshadowing already laid down, there probably wasn't a big like original ending that was so much more different. Armin stops Eren. Now this iceberg was actually written before the ending, so this probably has completely different context than what I wrote. But of course, we know for a fact that while Armin stalls Eren, the one to actually stop Eren and kill him, of course, is Mikasa. Though this entry is sort of right because, of course, while Mikasa is the one to cut off Eren's head and, of course, take it back and bury it under the tree, Armin does take public credit for being the one to stop the Founding Titan. And, of course, he uses that to allow him and the Alliance to try and make peace with the rest of the world after the rumbling. So this entry did sort of end up being right, but only halfway, as Mikasa still is the one to stop Eren. Though we do know that Armin is the last one to talk to Eren, and, you know, even I wouldn't say convince him of anything, actually. I was going to say something else, but it really works perfectly as is. Alright, King Fritz is the Marley Devil. Now, this is just a theory saying that King Fritz is probably the devil, or the Earth Devil, or the Marleyan Devil, whatever you want to call it, that gave Ymir his powers, or her powers. And in a sense, it basically is true, because King Fritz, I mean, he's definitely a bad person. He's a rapist. We know that for a fact. He had multiple kids with a really young girl, and he's a slave owner, and he's willing to have hys, guards hunt down slaves. He's a pretty awful person. So if you really think about it symbolically, he could be a devil. And of course, that devil ruined Ymir's life, but also in the process, by doing that, he sort of offered her that power by, one, basically telling her to fight for him, which would basically allow the Eldian tribe to persecute the world for hundreds of years. But in the same way, he also corrupted Ymir by being the cause of her getting the powers in the first place, by his cruelty of hunting her down in the forest and causing her to run into the tree, being symbolic of the devil handing Ymir the fruit of knowledge that would give her her actual Founding Titan powers. So you can actually, really think about this deeply and say that, yeah, King Fritz is at least supposed to mirror that myth of the devil, or the devil is supposed to mirror that myth of King Fritz. And there's also another bit of, another entry that has a bit of foreshadowing later on that I think also is another valid interpretation of this theory that will go on later. Frida saw Eren in the mirror. Now, this is actually an entry that might be brought back one more time, because they mentioned someone else that Frida might have seen. But as we know, in the scene in Season 3, we see Frida in the mirror, and she looks at something, and she gets scared by it. And a lot of people theorize that it was Eren she saw in the mirror, and it was him trying to at least give her some message as the Founding Titan. We don't know if this is 100% true, but it's certainly a good theory. Not all Beast Titans are monkeys. Now, we don't know for a fact. I don't know if this was written before or after we got to the Rumbling arc, but we do know for a fact that not all Beast Titans are monkeys. We see from the fact that Falco, while having Beast Titan blood, was able to turn into a bird by thinking about what another Beast Titan could be, is just confirmation enough that we know that not all Beast Titans were monkeys. But of course, we also see later on in the Rumbling arc that there are a ton of different types of Beast Titans that don't just follow the body plan of a monkey. Of course, they're still very humanoid, but we know there's a flying one at least. We know there's monkey ones. There's a ton of Beast Titans, and it also kind of goes with the Jaw Titan too. But we already see that. It can be a lion, or it can be like a little gremlin. But the point is, yeah, not all Beast Titans are monkeys, and this is 100% confirmed by the manga as we see in the Rumbling arc. Now, I actually wasn't expecting this entry to come up so soon, but this theory is that Eren is the Land Devil. And of course, this goes hand in hand with saying that King Fritz is the Land Devil, because in the same way, you could think of it as, Eren being the Land Devil that caused all the destruction Ymir caused. Though instead of that being the destruction she caused thousands of years ago, it would be the destruction that she causes by letting the rumbling be unleashed during, the modern era of the story. And of course, in the same way Fritz can be seen as a devil, Eren can be seen as a devil. He even mentions that he would become a devil or an evil to save humanity. And of course, he also tells Historia that he tells her, to become the worst girl in the world to help humanity or to help herself. And you can definitely see this type of foreshadowing. I already went over it in the last few entries, but, this just follows up by saying that not only could King Fritz be seen as a devil, but even Eren. And also in the season 4 opening, we even see an image of the Land Devil, and we see it kind of modeled after the Attack Titan. So yeah, it's definitely supposed to be at least seen that way in the anime, or at least the artist thought it was cool enough to include. So yeah, this one's has a lot more to it than the King Fritz one, but the thing about symbolism is that you can kind of just, it works for both. Like it works both ways. It works a lot for King Fritz and it works a lot for Eren. And while it's supported more for Eren in the show, there's definitely plenty of evidence because I yapped about it for like 2 minutes with King Fritz. So yeah, another cool detail that I like about the show, and it just shows the depth of the symbolism and the foreshadowing that this show has, even in the early days, that could lead back to early stuff. Because, you know, we knew about the devil super long ago. Like, I think in season 2 is when it's first mentioned. And of course, all this content about King Fritz and Eren is more season 4 stuff. So yeah, Isayama really is just kind of a genius like that. No glaze, of course. How did Eren Kruger get the Attack Titan? Now this is just a simple question of how did he get the Attack Titan? Because we don't really know much about Attack Titan users before that. And actually, now that I think about it, I don't think we even see any previous Attack Titan users during the final fight in the Rumbling arc. So it really is a mystery how the Attack Titan was able to be, you know, moved around for so long, especially without being part of Marley's military. And I don't think we'll really ever know unless Isayama just comes out and says it. But of course, I think, obviously, it was just supposed to be manipulated in secret so that Eren could keep it going all the way up until him. Because, you know, we think, or at least I think it's confirmed, I don't know if it is, but it's basically confirmed that Eren had control of the founder, or not the founder, the Attack Titan, and was able to keep it, you know, in line to the point where it could come up to him so he could do what he had to be done. Or at least Ymir was. We don't know if it was Eren or not. But we do know that obviously the Attack Titan was able to send specific memories to Kruger and stuff just to keep things pushing forward. Like, for example, he sends the memory of Armin and Mikasa to Kruger to tell Grisha, which would then have Grisha realize, holy shit, why does my son have friends named Armin and Mikasa? You know, it makes Grisha kind of think, oh my god, Kruger was right, you know, this is a prophecy, I gotta give the Titan to Eren. It just works like that. And unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever find out how the Titan was given to him. But I think it was pretty obvious that, you know, Fate or Ymir or Eren or something was manipulating the scales so that he would get the Titan. And while we don't know the exact man behind it, or the exact person, man or female, we don't know if a female had it. You know, could be a dude, could be a girl. We'll never know. But yeah, that's kind of my take on the previous Titan before Kruger, because it's really not as important. The point is that he had the Titan, and that we see that it was manipulated by Eren, or Ymir most likely, to eventually land on Eren. Hanji is non-binary. Now this is just a simple thing that people refer to, or they believe Hanji is non-binary. Now I don't know if it's been officially confirmed or not, but I mean, it pretty much just works. I mean, I don't think they actually use many gender pronouns to refer to her, and of course they call her sir. I mean, that could just be a military thing, but it doesn't really matter, you know. If a lot of people find this nice aspect about a character and decide to project it onto her, that's cool. It's actually nice that the non-binary community can find a character within the show, especially because I don't think a lot of animes really have representation for LGBTQ characters. So I think it's a cool little interpretation that doesn't really impact the story, you know, at all. But it's nice that a community was able to find, you know, some similarities between themselves and a character. And I will say this, it's better than what us blacks got, because we just got a guy named Onion Coupon. He is really cool though. I mean, he knows how to fly a plane. I think that's pretty fucking cool. But, you know, anyways, moving on. AOT 2 protagonist. Now this is continuing on earlier from the Attack on Titan game mention. And of course, I mentioned how Attack on Titan 2 tells the story from Season 1 to Season 2 a lot differently than the first game. And while the first game just tells the Season 1 story, then does its own weird non-canon thing with the Beast Titan stuff in Season 2, AOT 2, instead of telling the story from the perspective of the main characters like Eren, Armin, and Mikasa and Levi, it instead tells the stories as our main character being basically our own self-insert character. So we make him at the beginning of the game, we name him and stuff, and he basically becomes our protagonist. Of course, our main character just happens to be around for every major battle that happens in between Season 1 and 2. But, yeah, we just, for a fact, that's what our AOT 2 protagonist is. He's nobody. He's just a nameless soldier that was present during every major event. But a lot of people also like to say that, the soldier is canon. And while you could say that, I mean, it is a game, so of course it's not going to be 100% canon. And we do know that AOT 2, you know, at least its post-Season 3 story is definitely not canon because it follows the main characters forming their own new regiment and taking back territory and doing many fights with people like Reiner and Bertold and Zeke, and then even recruiting them for some reason. But, it's just a nice little headcanon. And honestly, you could really do that with anybody, though, because, the game wasn't designed around being canon. It was just designed around having a self-insert. And while I personally don't like self-inserts, and I'm happy the Season 3 story just allowed you to play as the characters, some people are. That's why people like Xenoverse, even though it's kind of a, dumb game. But let me not piss off all the Dragon Ball fans. But if you do like the character being canon, then that's nice. And of course, though, if he is canon, I wonder if he's still around. Because, he or she, since, he's a makeable protagonist, he could be anything. But he's probably dead because he either died during the Uprising arc and was killed or arrested by the military, or, he died during Erwin's charge with Zeke, which actually could explain why he wasn't around during Season 3. But we don't know, because, the show wasn't designed with him, and he wasn't really designed much with the show in mind. He was just designed to have a little self-insert. Alright, we're now on Tier 4 of the Iceberg. And to kick it right off, we're going to start with the Season 3, Episode 12 ending. Now, normally the ending for Season 3 is already kind of creepy enough, at least the first ending. But we know for a fact that this specific ending is even more creepy because it actually just starts getting, like, little analog horror flashes. I kind of feel dumb for calling analog horror stuff. But, like, the screen gets interrupted, and then eventually we literally just see a scene from the Battle for Shiganshina arc. And it's, of course, the scene where Mikasa and Eren and Levi are debating over who should inherit the Colossal Titan between Armin or Erwin. And I think it's a really cool moment, especially because, the show went on a hiatus. And it wasn't a long hiatus, but it went on a hiatus after Season 3, Episode 12. So, it was a nice little teaser just to keep people going before the next arc came out. Poopy Pants. Now, according to Isayama, all the characters smell horrible and have shit stains in their underwear that can't be washed off because the gravitational force exerted by the ODM gear is so strong that it compresses the user's digestive system, causing them to shit themselves. Not even mentioning, by the way, that there's no, like, sewer system and water or plumbing in Paradis, so... And based on the fact that they're soldiers and they're just kind of out there in the wilderness all the time, the characters probably do fucking stink. But yeah, I think it's funny that, the writer himself just said that, oh yeah, the characters just are constantly shitting themselves because of the fucking G-force that they have to deal with from their ODM gear. Which is really funny and something I can't really unthink of now. Like, yeah, all these characters look cool as fuck zipping around in their gear, but did you know they're shitting themselves? Anyways, moving on. Eren is right. Now, this is less of a theory, but more of just an ideal that people say that, Eren is right for starting the rumbling and wanting to kill everyone. And, I mean, the show basically kind of just says yeah, because, we see later on that Paradis does end up falling to ruin no matter what. But, like I said, it is still ambiguous, and while, the obvious interpretation is that, Paradis fell to ruin because, the other, 80% of the world, after finally regaining their population, wanted to strike back at the people who killed billions of people. But it could also be from a civil war. We never really know. And the whole point is that it's ambiguous, The whole story is about war and how the cycle of violence just keeps perpetuating. It starts with the Eldians, doing a bunch of genocide. So the Marleyans do genocide. And then they send even more people to the Eldians, which causes their genocide. And then towards the end, some more genocide happens, That's the whole point of the story. War never... I was going to quote Fallout, but, war never changes. It just keeps happening. And the only way to stop it is to try and find some peace. And while it does work temporarily, it still keeps happening, because that's just human nature. That's just how the story is. But if you look at it objectively, technically Eren is kind of right, because if it's confirmed that, Paradis getting bombed and destroyed was because of the rumbling, then that basically just confirms that the full rumbling would have been correct. But that doesn't, guarantee that the future is just going to be perfect for Paradis, because, things can still happen. But Eren is sort of right at the end of the day. even if his method is unethical. But the whole point of him, being stopped is the fact that he is unethical because, they want to make change without violence. But, that's the point of the entry. Eren saw the ending. Now, the ending didn't come out when this entry was made, but of course, this refers to the fact that when Eren kisses Historia, he obviously gets a little flash of Titan knowledge, and he sees a bunch of shit, and he gives like a really grim face. And of course, we find out later that basically Eren saw the rest of his life from there. Well, he saw a lot of shit. I'm pretty sure he saw his father's life as well. But, he basically finds out that all this shit was set in stone and that he can't stop it. He can't stop the rumbling, him dying and all that. He can't be with Mikasa. He just finds out that his life has been on a railroad the whole time, and that he's gonna die in a few years. And this actually makes sense, and it's confirmed because of chapter 139. And this obviously actually adds a bit to Eren's character because it shows why he was depressed towards the end, Especially during some of the flashback stuff during the Marley arc. We see that Eren, when he says, that his friends are the only thing he cares about, he's being fully truthful. He just wants to see his friends happy. But he knows that he can't really do anything. He's going to have to betray them. He's going to have to do all the fucked up shit he does to them. He's going to have to start the rumbling. It's just what it is. And especially with Sasha. He knows Sasha's going to die, and he can't stop it. And that's also why I think Eren laughs when she dies. I mean, that's also just an uncomfortable reaction that people do. Like, I laugh sometimes in uncomfortable situations. And I believe Eren does it earlier in the show. But it also could just be Eren laughing because, he's realizing, oh shit, I really can't do anything to stop all of this. But yeah, that's just a nice little theory that basically got turned into fact, which is really nice because there were a lot of crack theories towards the end of this, towards the end of the release cycle of the show. And it's nice to see some of them actually have some sort of substance. Reiner has split personality disorder. Now, this theory comes from the fact that people believe that Reiner has split personality disorder, mainly because people think that he basically got split into two personalities, one being one that is basically him taking on the role of Marcel during the Warriors' expedition to Paradis, and then one being the real, more, depressed Reiner, who just wants to end the war and help his family. And while it's not really explicitly stated, I think it's less more multiple personality disorder and more just Reiner. I guess there's not really a good way to put it because I don't know the medical term for it, but it's basically him taking on the traits of Marcel as more of a coping mechanism because he knows he's just this broken man. He's a little kid, like he's 12 when he's sent on the mission. He sees one of his friends, and his only friend who he deems as competent, die, and he's forced to take this leader role when he knows he's really not that guy. So he just toughs it up and acts out like he's that guy, but once he gets back to Marley, he realizes he's not, and he just, he tries to kill himself. So I think it's less split personality disorder and more Reiner just kind of forcing himself to act tough for the sake of his friends, the other warriors. But it could be, but it's never explicitly stated, so it is, at the end of the day, just a theory. A game theory. Erwin over Armin. This just refers to the fact that some people believe that Erwin should have been chosen over Armin. Especially a lot of people who don't like Armin, especially towards the end of the show. They believe that Eren would have been the better choice and that he would have, had a better response to the rumbling. And while, the show basically shows that Erwin, wanted Armin to be picked and that he didn't really want to be revived, it is still fun to wonder what would have happened because, especially with a lot of the Season 4 stuff, it is interesting to wonder, like, what would Erwin have thought of the Radion Liberio, or the rumbling, or what would have he thought of the Jaegerists? Would he have gotten bombed like Pixis or Zachary, or would he have sided with Eren and actually rallied the rest of the scouts to him to have the rumbling happen? We'll never know. It is a very fun what if though, and honestly, I do kind of wish it could get explored in some sort of like spin-off story, but considering the rate of content at this point, we're never gonna get it, just like we'll never get AOT 3. Eren is depressed. This is pretty simple. Eren's depressed. In the sequel to Attack on Titan Junior High, actually, we do know that Eren is depressed. He's even referred to as being such. But we also, in the main continuity, it is basically true that Eren is kind of depressed. I mean, he doesn't get diagnosed with depression, but like during the flashbacks during the Marley arc, like I just mentioned, we see him, very gloomy, very down. And towards the end of Season 3, we also see him sort of, in his own world, just kind of, very separated from his friends, unlike how he used to be. And obviously, any person would be depressed. Like, if I found out exactly when I was going to die, and find out that I had to murder a shit ton of people, and I was gonna fuck up my friends, relationships. And if I found out that one of my friends was gonna die and I can't stop it, I'd be depressed too. Like, Aaron's kind of valid for that. So yeah, it's less of a theory and more of just basically a confirmed character detail, even if it's not like explicitly stated, but it's all but confirmed. High School Cast. AOT High School Cast it's sort of a spin-off or a little gag manga that is basically in the back of volumes 21 to 34 of Attack on Titan, which is usually just like a little 1 or 2 page manga that just depicts the whole Attack on Titan cast as, high schoolers. So for example, Reiner's gonna be a jock, Jean's a bully, Armin's a nerd, Mikasa's a goth, and the whole point is that Aaron's just this normal dude. And some things happen, like Aaron gets kidnapped by a cult of people who worship Ymir and think he's the reincarnation of her, which actually has a little bit of foreshadowing and was used in a lot of theories. And there's also one where Aaron gets bored with life and dreams a zombie apocalypse so that he can be interesting. So yeah, there's nothing really to it. And the next entry, which I'm just going to get right into, is the High School AU Bleed-In, which is a theory that the High School AU from High School Cast is actually supposed to like bleed in to the fact that well, not bleed in, but it's supposed to be like, it's supposed to have relevance to the real series. And of course it sort of does, like, the one in volume 34 has the characters leave a movie theater after watching a movie, and they talk about, it being bad, and it's supposed to be a reference to the fan reactions of the ending. And if you think about it, a lot of stuff does bleed in, because Ymir shows up in High School Cast, and they have the whole Aaron being the reincarnation of her. So yeah, things do bleed in and things do tend to cross, but that's just also how Isayama writes these spin-offs. He does the same thing with AOT Junior High and its sequel AOT High School, which I'll talk about a little more later, with Junior High having a lot of foreshadowing, like the Ghost Frida, or the fact that there's a little bit of foreshadowing about the Warriors. So that's just kind of how he writes, and less of a more literal, the dimensions are colliding, like it's, Marvel or something. Before the Fall. Now, this refers to one of the many Attack on Titan spin-off mangas, this one being a prequel that takes place a few decades before the original story, which basically follows our protagonist, who was a kid he has a really metal backstory actually. His mom was eaten by a Titan when he was pregnant, or in his mom's belly while she was pregnant, and the Titan would eventually die, and the main character would be born from his mom's dead body, from the body of a Titan. And so he was treated as like an outcast and paraded around, and he was eventually purchased as a slave for a rich family. And while he was there, he'd eventually meet their daughter or whatever, and he joined the Scouts right before they had ODM gear. And the manga just covers a lot of crazy shit. Like, it covers the backstory of the Scouts, it covers how they were before ODM gear, it covers how ODM gear was made, so we actually meet the inventor of it in the manga, funny enough. And of course, we also have weird lore, like the Titan cult would sabotage the walls and let a Titan in to kill a bunch of people. One of those Titans actually being the Titan that ate the main character's mom. And we also have the Titan Ogre from this series, which is a really intelligent and buff Titan that has like a shit ton of durability and is able to just like, he's intelligent, he's smart, he's a smarter Titan than normal, especially compared to like a lot of the even extra abnormal Titans in the series. And I'd say he's even smarter than the talking Titan, though he doesn't talk. And of course he serves as a recurring antagonist in the show. And also, funny enough, while it's not considered canon, because there is stuff, I don't think there's stuff that contradicts it in the main manga, I'm not sure because I haven't read it, but materials from this manga are actually used in the games. Like, for example, Iron Bamboo and Iceberg Stone are materials that were used to make ODM gear, and eventually they're introduced in the main series. I think in background mentions, like, of course, they want to mine the Iceberg Stone, which is used to make ODM gear in Season 4, and that's why, Marley takes over. But also, these materials are used in the games like Wings of Freedom and AOT 2 as crafting recipes for extra ODM gear. So yeah, it's actually a pretty nice thing, honestly. I do want to eventually read it, though. I'm just not a big fan of manga. I don't really like reading comics. I prefer, words on a page instead of words with some images. But maybe one day I'll eventually get to it, because it does seem interesting. And maybe if I get to it, I'll make a video summarizing it, because there's not many videos that go over it on YouTube nowadays. But it is a very nice thing to at least see the, creation of ODM gear and just see some of the crazy spin-off shit that was written outside of Isayama's, grasp. Eren kills the Alliance. Now, this is just a theory that says that Eren would be the one to kill the Alliance, including all his friends like Annie, and Mikasa and Armin and stuff. But obviously this is false because he doesn't kill them. In fact, he lets them live at basically every turn. And while he does, sick a shit ton of Titans at them, they're able to take it out. And of course, we know that Eren knows the ending, so he knows he's not going to kill them. And we know he doesn't want to kill them. He says that his friends are his most important thing. So obviously, he doesn't kill the Alliance, and this theory is proven false because it was written before the ending came out. So they wouldn't have had any, way of knowing. Eren controls birds. This is just a simple theory that says Eren is able to control birds. Not really, much to it. It just says that he can control birds, spy on the Alliance. And specifically, one of the things cited to this is the fact that there's a bird in the background of the scene where Eren and Armin are, or not Eren and Armin, I keep mixing their names. Annie and Armin are confessing to each other. So yeah, it's a pretty simple theory. And it also ties into another theory that say that Eren would eventually reincarnate as the bird that would, mess with Mikasa's scarf in the ending panel. And of course, people meme that to all hell, saying Eren is 100% the bird, and he gets cucked by watching Mikasa marry Jean, or just random man. We don't even know who he is that Mikasa marries, but it's probably Jean, considering the entire story and, the fact that Jean does like her. But, just another simple, dumb theory. Nothing too much to it. Eren kills Flock. Now, I couldn't really find too much on this, though, this was also written before, the fact that Flock died, because it was on the boat. It was before the whole boat stuff, so we don't know if, they just thought that Eren was going to kill Flock or something. Maybe they thought that Eren guided the bullet to kill Flock or whatever. It's kind of dumb because we know for a fact that he doesn't. Maybe it's the fact that Eren used Flock and radicalized him specifically so that he didn't have to have one of his real friends die. I don't know. It's just sort of a dumb, objectively wrong theory, and I can't really find too much on it, so we're going to move on. Reiner is Helos. Now, this is another interesting theory, actually, that has a lot of not foreshadowing, but symbolism. Now, first I should mention what Helos is. Now, Helos is the mythological figure that was able to kill King Fritz and stop the Titans and the Eldians, according to Marleyan myth. And of course, we know that Helos isn't real, but people do believe he's real, at least. Until, the ending of the story, where I think Marley says he's not real. Or I believe Willie Tybur specifically does, and he says that that's a lie. But the theory is that Reiner is supposed to parallel this, hero. And basically, it sort of is true, because, Reiner, he decides to step up, he defends Marley, and, he tries to be that hero. And of course, he even literally wrestles with the source of all Titans at the ending. So you could actually make that connection, that Reiner is that Marleyan hero that was able to stop the threat of the Titans. And while he's not the one to take out the hallucigenia, as that's, Ymir, Mikasa cutting off Eren's head. But you could argue that it is just Reiner's foreshadowing. And I actually like this foreshadowing a lot for Reiner, because it adds a lot more depth to his character. And it also, adds more to his roots as a Marleyan, because, Helos is a specifically Marleyan myth. E plus H equals Y. Now, I should first mention the fact that this is a play on the Game of Thrones thing. Now, another reference to Game of Thrones, funny enough, because, I mentioned Titan folk and Free Folk's connection. Now, this theory also has a connection to Game of Thrones. Now, in Game of Thrones, there's a theory called R plus L equals J, which is a reference to, it's basically just a way to not spoil, like, who is the parents of who, because a lot of theories in Game of Thrones are that, some people's parents aren't who they're said to be, and R plus L plus J is the theory of who is Jon Snow's parents. Now, I was going to avoid spoiling it, but, Game of Thrones is so old, and while it's not confirmed in the books, George literally had the show writers answer who Jon's parents are to write the show. And, they wrote the show, and, the show came out, and his parents end up being, Rhaegar Stark and Lyanna, or not Rhaegar Stark, Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. So, we know Jon's parents. It's definitely going to be that in the book. That's one of those things that's just probably going to be true. But, obviously, R plus L equals J is just their initials together, saying that they went together and had this kid. And similarly to this theory, E plus H equals Y is the theory that Eren and Historia will have a child either named Ymir, or that their child will be the reincarnation of Ymir. Now, it's not really mentioned on this iceberg if it's either or, but it could really go either way, as either they name it Ymir to honor Ymir, who basically sort of brought them together in a way. due to all the shit that she manipulated for Fate. Or you could also say that it's a reincarnation of Ymir and that it'll be like the strongest founding titan or some dumb shit like that. Either way, just a nice little theory and a fun Game of Thrones reference. Ymir is controlling Eren. Now this theory is sorta true retroactively because we know that Fate was written specifically so that Eren had to do what he did and that he had really no control over any of this. But we don't know if it's just Ymir causing it or if it's the founding titan or the attack titan. But this theory is more a theory that it's directly Ymir controlling Eren for the rumbling, which I don't think is true because, it's not, We see Eren literally have to convince Ymir to do the rumbling. It's definitely not her doing. Now, it is probably her doing to control Fate to make things happen so that the rumbling would happen and Mikasa would set herself free, which would in turn make Ymir set herself free. But I think that's also a lot more subconscious because with the literal manifestation we see of Ymir, she's obviously more conflicted on doing things like the rumbling and needs that push in the end for, Eren to do it. But yeah, there's a lot of things like that in Attack on Titan when it comes to Fate that you can't really theorize too much on because there's not a lot of concrete evidence besides just foreshadowing and theories. Neck veins. Now, this is a theory, it's a very fucking stupid theory, that says that Eren's neck veins are more pronounced in one shot where he looks at Mikasa, and that, of course, means he has a boner for her, and that Eren and Mikasa is canon. And there's also another theory called Shining Eyes, which says that Eren and Historia's eyes are shining when they look at each other, which says that they like each other, which makes, that thing canon, which probably has more evidence than the neck boner one, but they're both kind of dumb, and I don't really want to talk about them too much. So yeah, that's neck vein, neck boner theory. Very funny. Chapter 1 Dream. Now this refers to the dream Eren has in the beginning of Chapter 1, or the beginning of Episode 1, where he sees a lot of, foreshadowing. We see stuff like Ymir's children, we see stuff like Willy Tiber's kids' toys. It's just a lot of foreshadowing for later stuff in the series. And of course this goes into, what I mentioned earlier with how I say that, Attack on Titan was planned out from the start, because things like Willy Tiber's kids' toys are in this dream. And that's such a small detail that takes place so much more later in the timeline compared to this dream that it basically confirms that Isayama really knew this shit was coming way ahead of time. And it's one of those details that I really like about him as a writer, because he's able to plant these seeds so early on and follow through with them, at least in a satisfying way. For the most part. It depends on if you like a lot of the twist and foreshadowing. But that's all up to your own discretion. I can't really change your opinion on what you really want, because there's no point in doing that. The series is meant to be interpreted in whatever way you want. Forgive me if I mispronounce this, but Akatsuki no Requiem music video. This is just a reference to the music video for the, I want to say the fourth ending of the show. It's the ending for Season 3, Part 1. And this one is called Akatsuki no Requiem. And the music video has had a lot of attention because people theorized that this was just a music video basically showing what would happen with the ending of Attack on Titan. And it starts with a man on Earth basically going to a grave and giving flowers to it before going back to another society filled with birds and shit, and he has a kid and whatnot. So people were saying, oh, the bird guy is Eren, and he's putting flowers on his friends' graves and then going back to Paradis and having his kid with Historia. It's a lot of things, and I think it's a very interesting theory, actually. And I think that would have been a really cool way to tie into an ending if this was actually what happened. But of course we find out that this wasn't what was, supposed to come to pass. But it was very interesting at the time, and definitely one of my more liked theories towards the end of the show, since, especially with show stuff, the manga was a lot more tame, but when it came to the end of the show, due to how horrible the schedule was, and how a lot of people took very little details in the trailer literally, people would theorize the most craziest shit about time travels and alternate timelines and stuff, and it just ended up not being true. But this was one of the more believable ones. That's not only does it have a lot more concrete evidence, but it was also set up from Season 3, which gives it a lot more credence. Also, not to mention, or I should mention this, there is also a fan manga called AOT no Requiem based on this name, and of course it's just a rewrite at the ending where Eren wins. It's kinda ass, honestly, after reading it. again, after all this time, it's not even really that good. And I still think I like the original ending more. And while a full rumbling ending is interesting, I don't think this specific manga does it well. Alright, now we're about halfway through in tier 5 of 10. Now, before I do this entry, I do want to mention this one does get a lot more into like real world topics, so if you don't like that type of stuff, you don't want to talk about anti-Semitism or World War II, skip a little bit. But I do have to mention this because it's in the Iceberg, and it's not too bad. But if you don't want to hear about it, I'll probably put a timestamp. If not, just skip like 2-3 minutes ahead, and then you'll be good. Anyways, continuing on with this entry, World War II, and of course, its joint entry, Attack on Titan is anti-Semitic. Now, this entry could have a lot of interpretations, but the main interpretation is obviously there's a very big similarity between how Eldians are treated and how the Jews were treated in World War II. And especially if you think about it with how the technology in Attack on Titan, especially in the outside world, is around that, like, you know, early 1900s, maybe even World War II level of technology, you know, there's a lot of parallels that can be drawn. And of course, people have used that to say that the show is anti-Semitic and could just be, you know, specifically relating to Jews on purpose for malicious reasons. And while I don't think that is true, I think there is credence to the fact that we are supposed to at least draw some parallels between the Eldian persecution and the real-life persecution of Jews. But we don't really know. I don't think Isayama has really spoken on it. I think maybe he did, and he said it was just like, it's supposed to be a story and there's not really supposed to be a reference. But there definitely is some sort of, like, you know, there's very much a parallel there. I mean, there's a character in the show, I'll probably put a picture of him on screen. He literally looks like Hitler, but like, I think with lighter hair and without a mustache. So there's definitely some basis on this. But at the end of the day, of course, you know, art is going to imitate life and the other way around. Though it is one of those things where, like, life, you know, came first. Like, World War II happened way more, or plenty of years before Attack on Titan came out. But of course, you know, a lot of things are going to take inspiration from real life, especially fiction. And I don't think the show or the manga was written in malicious intent, because, you know, it's not saying anything bad about World War II. It's just using that sort of association we have. And of course, it's more about, I think the manga, at least, is more about, you know, the perpetuation of war and the cycle of hatred on not only just races, but people in general. So it is what it is. There is that connection, and if you want to make it, you're free to make it, but I don't believe it was made for anything super bad. Titans don't poop, but they have intestines. Going from like a really serious entry to a dumb entry is a lot of tonal whiplash, but I mean, this is exactly what it says. Titans don't poop, but they have intestines. But they also kind of don't, because we see Eren just kind of in a big pool of blood. I mean, maybe that's just how the Titans look on the inside, I don't know. But I've always interpreted that scene in Season 1 where Eren's in the Santa Titan as him literally just in a pit, which is the Titan's stomach. But it could be that he's also inside the intestine, because I mean, Titans are big, humans are small. You never know. But yeah, Titans don't poop, but they have intestines. Very simple. But we know they don't poop because they don't really need to eat. We know that Titans literally puke up their meals, including humans. Because Titans don't eat to eat, they eat probably, I don't know if it's especially confirmed, but basically them eating is them subconsciously trying to find a Titan shifter so that they can eat one and transform him back into a human. So yeah, Titans don't poop, because they also don't have genitals or buttholes either. They puke out their food. Pretty simple entry. Gabi / Eren comparisons. Now this one's also pretty simple, and it refers to the fact that Gabi and Eren have very similar backstories and a lot of parallels. You know, they were living in a society that they felt trapped in, that they wanted to leave. Eventually their place gets raided, and so they swear hatred against a bunch of other people. But eventually they do meet those people and decide that maybe they're not all so bad. Though the difference, of course, is that while Eren does meet those immigrants in Marley and think, damn, all these people are bad, he still knows he has to do the rumbling, so he just apologizes to them and then goes and does it anyways in a few years. But with Gabi, of course, she finds out that Paradisians aren't so bad and decides to try and fight for peace instead of letting the rumbling go through. And also, because, her family lives in Marley, so of course she wants to fight for peace, because if she just lets the rumbling happen, the Eldians are going to be fine, but her family isn't, because it's only the Eldians on Paradis. So yeah, I think it's always been nice that Isayama includes characters like this, because Gabby is a very interesting parallel to Eren, and I think a lot of people kind of skip over that, especially because a lot of people mindlessly hate her, as I mentioned earlier. But I think she's a good character, and I think these parallels are very nice and add a lot to her, especially considering she's a character added so late in the game that it would be a little hard to develop her a lot. Weird soundtrack names. Now this refers to the fact that the AOT soundtrack has a lot of weird names. Now first of all, I just want to mention, Hiroyuki Sawano, he's a great fucking composer. Like, the soundtrack's beautiful. I love the AOT soundtrack. It's one of my favorites in really anything. But I will mention that the names are kind of weird. Like, for example, one of the best songs in this, and a song that I can actually play on guitar, funny enough, Shingeki GT 201302118 Kyojin, is kind of a weird name for a song. Like, apparently some of these names do have some sort of meaning, but a lot of them are just kind of weird. But that's also just a running thing with Sawano stuff from what I've read. And what I've also read is that officially there is no explanation. They're just, the producer is just like that. But I don't really care. As long as the music's good, it's fine. It does make things a little annoying to find on streaming services if you don't know exactly the name of the track and you just want to find something without knowing. But you'll find it eventually, so it's not that deep. Yeast Titans. Now first of all, rest in peace Matt Pat. I know he's not dead, but I hope he's having a great retirement. I heard he's doing like Congress now. It's crazy to think that he's moved up. But this, refers to the film theory video on Attack on Titan, which was theorizing what Titans were made of. And of course, the theory basically says that they're made out of essentially yeast because of how they just kind of live and they don't eat and they need sun to, move. It's a whole weird thing, but of course this ended up being completely wrong, as the Titans are more eldritch creatures created by a weird snake, bug, alien, eldritch thingy. We don't know, but we'll get more into what it might be later on in the Iceberg. Junior High Marley Arc. This obviously refers to the continuation of the Attack on Titan Junior High manga, which covers the, well, it doesn't cover the Marley Arc, but it has Marley Arc characters. Like, we see Peak, we see Porco, we see a lot more characters, we see the main characters go to high school, Eren becomes depressed, similar to his early Marley Arc self. I haven't read it personally, so I can't comment too much on the story, but it is nice to see that it's continued, and, eventually one of these days, even though it probably won't happen, I really hope it does get adapted, because we need more fun AOT in our lives, instead of just the depressing, awfully sad main story that we already have. Oliver Peak. Now, this refers to basically the original prototype design of Peak. I'll have that on screen. And it's basically just a scrapped concept character for who was originally going to be the Card Titan. And this guy's name would be Oliver Peak. And his face would kind of look like the old Card Titan's fake. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on if you're too gooned out or not, Isayama decided to redesign the character and make it sort of a twist and joke that, instead of being some, I guess, ugly looking dude, he would instead be a girl, and she'd be really beautiful, and that'd be the joke, like, oh, this ugly looking Titan is actually a beautiful woman underneath, which I think actually kind of works for the gag a little bit. But it would also be interesting to see a world where the Card Titan was just kind of just this regular dude, but I guess we'll never find out, unless, I don't know, they make some AOT remake where that shit happens, but that's never gonna fucking happen. Wit was pro Eren Mika. Now, this is just a theory that Wit Studio, the original studio that animated Attack on Titan for seasons 1 to 3, was actually pro Eren and Mikasa. And this kind of makes sense, as they put a lot of effort into scenes like Mikasa confessing, or sort of confessing to Eren at the end of season 2, but we have no real actual concrete evidence, just the fact that it kind of seems like that based on the way they wrote the show, or I guess directed the show, because the material was already written. But yeah, another simple theory. Moving on. Hidden references. Now this refers to the fact that Attack on Titan surprisingly has a lot of hidden references to memes. Like, for example, obviously there's the Saul Goodman Titan, and a lot of other Titans doing meme poses. And also, this may or may not refer to Attack on Titan references in other media, such as anime or cartoons. Like, it's blanking on me, but I'll have some pictures up on screen of just other shows where Attack on Titan is referenced, and of course meme references in Attack on Titan. Alright, now we're finally on a really interesting entry, and that is the live action films. Now, a lot of people might be thinking, oh, there's Attack on Titan films? Well, actually, there's like 8 or 9 of them. Basically, all of the arcs get their own individual movie that covers the arc in a really short form way. But, of course, we're going to be talking about the live action movies, which consist of 2 movies that are just a live action Attack on Titan. They're honestly kind of weird. They're sort of faithful, but not at the same time. Like, instead of retaking Tross, they're retaking Shiganshina, and also Levi is a completely separate character. He's not named Levi, and he's also kind of merged with Reiner, as it's revealed that he is the the Armored Titan, and I believe the commander is revealed to be the Colossal Titan, which is supposed to be the Erwin stand-in. So it's honestly very interesting to see how these movies differed, but yeah, it's also just interesting in general that Attack on Titan got live action movies. Also, we know that there was a possibility at first of an American live action AOT, but this never came to fruition. But hey, eventually, maybe someday we might get one, but I'm not holding my breath for it, as, some shows just deserve to stay in animation. And based on the creepy ass Titans from that live action movie, I think Attack on Titan is one of them. Mikasa's scarf is black in the manga. Now, this is just pretty simple. Mikasa's scarf in the manga is black, and in the anime it's red. And this is actually used as fuel for a lot of theories. People saying that the manga and anime were different timelines. It would eventually differ in their ending due to this detail of the scarf, along with other things like Aaron's hood on his outfit in season 1, and that being added in the flashbacks during the path section. But at a certain point, it's just little anime differences. While they were interesting as theory fuel, it was obviously turning out to be false, as we know that the anime pretty much adapted the manga's ending 1-to-1, with slight additions that made the story better. But that's kind of what we should have been expecting to the beginning. The anime has always been faithful, besides on one weird detail, which we're gonna pull up right now actually. Berserk mode. Now this refers to a fan name of basically Aaron's Titan mode, where he goes berserk. This was mainly only seen in season 1, where during his fight with Annie, after he gets knocked down, he gets back up and he has this basically his veins get more pronounced. He starts steaming a lot more and he gets red. It's like this really fiery rage mode, and a lot of people use this as a theory to basically say that it was another difference from the anime and the manga that would pay off. And in fact, a lot of people use this to basically say that towards the end, Aaron would use the Founding Titan and go in a rage mode. Like, maybe he'd make a body of his Attack Titan form and use a rage mode version of it to kill the rest of the Alliance. And that would be the big difference in the meaning of rage mode. And some people even theorize that rage mode was actually original Aaron from the manga timeline possessing normal Aaron to make him want to, fight and change the timeline. But this ended up not being true, and rage mode was just a cool visual effect used for the ending of season 1, and that never appeared again past that. And while it would have been interesting to see that as an idea, I feel like that also would have been a little too complicated, and maybe would have made the story kind of jump ship. But we'll never know. It is an interesting mode though, and I wish it was included in more of the animation, because it just looks cool. Seeing that combined with the Warhammer Titan powers in season 4 would have been super interesting. But unfortunately, it died with season 1, and died even further after Wit, stopped animating the show and it moved on to Mappa. AOT Harsh Mistress of the City. Now this is another spin-off of Attack on Titan, which basically tells the story of what happens during the other districts when Shiganshina fell. And it follows a garrison member named Rita, who basically is just our POV character, as, like I said, we see what happens in the other cities while Shiganshina is falling. There's not really much to this manga. It's pretty short, and I haven't read it personally, so I don't really know if it's good or not. I really haven't heard anyone talk about it. But it is interesting to see that perspective, as one of the more interesting things that we didn't really hear about in the main story is what actually does happen to those 3 other cities that were on the outermost side of the wall. So it's nice to see that. And while I don't know if it's canon or not, but it probably could be canon if I've actually read it, because, while it's not mentioned, it does seem like a pretty isolated story. So maybe I'll go back and read that, and yet again, make a video on it, just like I said, with the other spin-off, which I'm forgetting the name of right now. But you get the point. So moving on to the next entry. Alright, and for the last entry of tier 5, and sort of the last entry for the bigger tiers, This is Muv-Luv Alternative. Now, if you don't know what Muv-Luv Alternative is, Muv-Luv Alternative is the sequel to Muv-Luv, which is a visual novel where you're just a high school student and you have the option to fall in love with girls. But Muv-Luv Alternative took this novel and these characters and revealed that that was basically just a dream, and your main character is in the real world where he has to fight in like mechs in the military to deal with this alien threat. I don't know too much about it, but of course this manga, or technically visual novel, has a ton of parallels to it, the story of Attack on Titan. Now I could go really in depth on this, but I feel like I'd just be plagiarizing a very popular video by the YouTuber King Bullet, who I'll link him and this video in the description. But it's a really great video, and it covers a theory on how Muv-Luv was used to inspire the ending and the dynamics as long as the themes of Attack on Titan. And we know for a fact that Isayama was inspired by Muv-Luv, and that really inspired the way he wrote the story. So it is not just a theory, it's a fact. But of course, Muv-Luv existing and being Isayama's stated, inspiration caused a lot of theories to say that stuff that happened in Muv-Luv happened in, Attack on Titan, or will happen similarly. But I can't say much because, yet again, I haven't read Muv-Luv. I have it on my wish list, so I'll eventually get to it. But I do find it interesting, and like I said, watch that video by King Bullet. He covers it a lot better than I can, of course, because I think he's read Muv-Luv, and the video is just a lot older. So, the video is obviously wrong because, the ending came out after it. But it is still a nice video, and I think it's really cool to see things like this where a writer will have a very obvious inspiration that can be used to, like, theorize for endings. Like, it's just a neat little detail. And, yet again, I'll read Muv-Luv eventually, so maybe in a few years, if I ever get to reading it, because visual novels are kind of hard for me to read, if I do get to reading it, maybe I'll do a Muv-Luv Iceberg, if I end up liking it. Tier 6. Now, starting off this tier, we have quite possibly the worst thing to say, and that is Levi x Mikasa. It's a ship, but it's also incest because they're related, so no, it's a bad theory. Paradis is Madagascar. Now this refers to the fact that, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, the world map in Attack on Titan is most likely flipped, but for what we see in the actual manga, we know that the continent of Africa is basically just Marley, and we know that Paradis basically occupies the same location that Madagascar would in real life. So yeah, there's not really much on this, but there is also the crackpot theory from Titanfolk that eventually, somehow, Eren would complete the rumbling and turn all Paradisians into monkeys, specifically into lemurs, and they would populate the world, and it would eventually lead to the Madagascar movies. And honestly, I think this is an amazing theory. It's perfect, and it should have been what, Isayama done. He should have worked with DreamWorks, and he should have made this a reality. But obviously, he doesn't own the copyright to Madagascar. I don't know if he's even seen Madagascar. We could never know. But, hey, I think it's really cool if, the entire show just was ending up to be a prequel to Madagascar. That's really cool. Eren is King Julian confirmed, guys. Alright, anyways, next entry, obviously. Levi death painting. Now, I couldn't find too much on this, but I went back to the original post, and OP said that basically the in art, having roses pointed down is supposed to be like a foreshadowing of death, and during Mappa's showcase for season 4, they had a painting of Levi holding roses pointing downward. So that's the connection here. And while this is interesting, of course we know that Levi doesn't die, but we do know also that in season 4, and specifically the season 4 run, which had this painting, we see that Levi actually bombs himself, and until season 4 part 2 came out, it was ambiguous, at least to anime onlys, whether Levi survived or if he didn't. So this could have some meaning to that painting, but I guess we'll never know. Rumbling audio. This yet again refers to another entry based on the Mappa season 4 showcase, which basically says that someone heard some audio that would later be used in the rumbling, and yeah, it was just early stuff that we heard for season 4 part 2. Not really much about it besides that. I will mention though that I do want to go on a tangent here because we're talking about rumbling stuff, and I don't think it's mentioned on the Iceberg, but I want to mention the rumbling analog horror videos. They're not analog horror videos, but they're sort of analog horror, but they're made by the same guy who made the Backrooms videos, Kane Pixels, and I just find them really interesting. They're made to be like basically filmed as sort of old vintage cameras because, Attack on Titan takes place in a sort of World War I, World War II style society technology wise, and I just find them really cool. So yeah, I mean, this has nothing to do with the previous entry, but I thought I'd just mention that because it's a cool thing that the fan base did. Time loop theory. Now this is a theory that basically says that Attack on Titan is a time loop, and the theory basically states, at least one variation of the theory, is that the manga specifically is a time loop, and that the anime would be the last ending of the time loop, with this time loop being ended by future Eren going back to give memories to anime Eren to basically show him how to end the rumbling once and for all so that Paradis can be free. And while this has some credence to it, especially with a lot of the time travel stuff we see, like for example Eren convincing his father to kill the Rices, it was confirmed to be not true, as the ending of the anime and the ending of the manga are very similar and basically disprove any type of time loop. Though, if you really look at it in a meta-narrative sense, Attack on Titan is sort of a time loop, as, you know, I mean, you could say it's a time loop because we see the same story play out twice in the manga and the anime, but also, we see a loop of the cycle of violence. So it's less of a literal time loop and more of a loop of ideals, as we see, you know, a loop of how someone attacks someone and then those people retaliate, causing other people from that place to keep retaliating, causing a looping cycle of violence, which is one of the main themes of the series, of how war continues to fuel itself through tons of tragedies and how the only solution really is peace. So, yeah, that's just an interesting thing that I kind of got off of this. I didn't write that in my script originally, but I thought that would be something that I should fit in here because I never mentioned it before. Future Eren in Season 1. This is pretty simple. This just says that in Season 1, you could see future Eren. You really can't. He's not in any background from up to my knowledge. But technically, future Eren was there during the events. Or at least, he's able to view the events during the past section. And of course, he's eventually able to go into the real world, or at least somewhat like make himself tangible to convince Grisha to kill the Rice family. So it's not false, but it is an interesting thing. It would be cool if maybe eventually we get an Attack on Titan remake and they decide, you know what, let's plot future Eren and future Zeke in the actual background of Season 1, which would be actually really cool. But of course, you know, this wouldn't happen in real life because, you know, the Season 4 material wasn't written. And while I do give Isayama credit for a lot of, you know, foreshadowing and planning ahead, I don't think he planned ahead exactly that aspect of the story. And of course, we do see in the past section that Zeke and Eren aren't even able to be seen. Like, I'm pretty sure the explanation for Grisha seeing Zeke is that Eren gives Grisha the memories of himself seeing Zeke in this moment. So it's not even Grisha really seeing Zeke. So it's kind of complicated with time travel like that in Attack on Titan. But yeah, that's the explanation for this. Recap Booby exclusive scenes. Now this refers to the Attack on Titan recap films. I mentioned them early in the film entry, but obviously for each arc Attack on Titan they have its own corresponding recap film, which basically is just about a 2-hour condensed version of that specific arc. So you have one for the Crossed arc, you have one for the Female Titan arc, for the for the Uprising arc, for the Season 2 arc, for the Return to Shiganshina arc. I don't know if there's ones for Season 4, but of course there's the Final Attack film, which covers the ending of Season 4. So yeah, there's quite a few actual animated Attack on Titan movies, even if they're just recaps. And of course this entry refers to the fact that these films have exclusive scenes. Like for example, in the first one, we have the scene of Annie and Eren, or not Annie and Eren, but I guess Eren and Annie fight. But then eventually Mikasa shows up, and then we're gonna see them about to fight, and then cuts away. So we see that scene in the first recap film instead of where it should be in the anime, which was around Season 2, if I remember correctly. So yeah, not much to add really here. There's not like any groundbreaking original scenes. It's just extra content like that added in, which is even more interesting to see, as, you know, we see Isayama continue to go in and add extra shit to his work, which I'll mention on later because there's an entry about that actually. AOT was the inspiration for Titanfall. Now, Titanfall is a game series that I have really I don't really know anything about it. I do know it's related to Apex, and I have a friend of mine, she plays a lot of Apex, and I used to play Apex, but every time I play it I get a migraine. So I don't really have any reference for this. If anyone knows what this means, you know, you can put it in the comments. I'd love to see if this actually has any merit, or if it's just like, oh, both have Titan in the name and both are popular in the mid-2010s, so both are related or something. So I don't really know much about this one. AOT Zero. Now, a lot of animes and mangas have what's called a zero manga, which is basically either like an original draft manga for the series or a prequel. For example, stuff like Akame ga Kill and Fate Zero have zero mangas which serve as prequels to the story, with Fate Zero covering the Fourth Holy Grail War and Akame ga Kill Zero covering Akame's backstory. And so Attack on Titan Zero, instead of being a prequel, is actually just the original draft manga from 2006 sent to Shonen Jump by Hajime Isayama. And so the manga follows Murakumo and Tsubaki. Tsubaki being basically a girl equivalent of Eren, while Murakumo is equivalent of Captain Levi, with sort of elements of Eren mixed in. And basically Tsubaki showed up to Murakumo and she's like, hey, can you train me because I want to join the Scouts, or in this manga they're called the Vanguard Corps. And so Murakumo says that, you know, the Scouts are dangerous. It's a boring little Attack on Titan story where the Titans eventually attack, and Murakumo, he fights the Titans back and he transforms into a Titan, revealing that Titans have a weakness called a nucleus, which is an area in their arm. And while fighting the Titans, Murakumo gets his nucleus exposed, and while he fights the Titans back, he does sacrifice himself. And Tsubaki decides to honor her master's sacrifice and train to, you know, beat back the Titans because she wants to avenge her father. It's overall a pretty dull story. There's not really much into it, but it's nice to see the roots of what would eventually become one of the most best-selling and most popular anime of all time. And also, it's very interesting because there's a lot of differences. Like, instead of the walls being called the walls, they're called sacred trees, and Titans are specifically mentioned to be products of science. But overall, it's just a nice, small little chapter. I do recommend reading it if you ever get the chance, but it isn't too important to the main story that would eventually become Attack on Titan. Fake spoilers. This just refers to stuff that fans will do to, you know, make fun of shit. Like, they'll go into the fan base and give out fake spoilers just to mess with anime onlys. And of course, you know, they're fake. It's just dumb stuff. Like, oh, maybe someone will go in and say like, oh my god, dude, Levi dies in season 4 as a spoiler to fuck with a fan. And of course, maybe that actually happened. Honestly, that probably could happen, considering season 4 part 1 ends with Levi blowing himself up. Well, it doesn't end with that, but one of the hanging threads is that Levi blew himself up, and we don't know if he survived it or not. So there's a high chance that someone on Twitter probably told an anime only that he read the manga, and that Levi is actually dead. But this isn't really a specific entry, it's just the general idea of fake spoilers. So that could have happened, that could have not happened. Something like this could have happened at any time. I can't read all the internet, so I'll never know. Germanic tribe parallels. There wasn't really much I could find on this besides the whole World War II and Jewish relations, so I'm just gonna kind of skip this entry, just like I skipped the last entry, the Western AOT film, because I actually just mentioned it in the live action thing. But yeah, apparently there's something related to that. If y'all can look that up, that'd be great. I think maybe what this refers to is some relation of Germanic tribes to the Eldian tribe in ancient times that we see during the Ymir flashback. I may be wrong, because there's really nothing I can look up on the Reddit about this entry. So yeah, if you have any answers for this, leave it in the comments below. Ragnarok. Now, this is a theory that basically says that Attack on Titan has similarities to the Norse tragedy of Ragnarok. There's really not much to it, so I'm just gonna kind of gloss over this. But it's a pretty simple thing. It's just, oh, the story of Ragnarok and Attack on Titan are very similar. And I can actually see the parallels, especially with the whole end of the world stuff, and the whole world being reborn after the end of the world, which you could relate to the rumbling, and of course, the Paradis being able to live on their own for hundreds of years. So yeah, there's definitely something there, but it's something that could be more broadly covered in maybe a video, because I'm really no expert on Norse mythology. I think it's interesting, but I've never studied it, so I can't bring too much insight onto this one. Anime edited to serve the ending. Now, this originally mentioned that this was written before the ending, at least of the anime, and obviously this originally was probably supposed to refer to the fact that there are minor changes in the anime to make the ending better, stuff like Berserk mode being added as maybe foreshadowing, and stuff like Eren having his manga outfit instead of his anime outfit, and the flashbacks during paths. But of course, this actually does work in real life, because we know that stuff in the anime was added. For example, there's one big thing that I'll mention in the final tier that was added to make the ending a little bit better. And also, of course, we see that we see that stuff like the Thunder Spear plot hole in the ending of the Rumbling arc was added. For reference, basically a lot of people criticized that there were infinite Thunder Spears during the Rumbling arc, but this was added in the anime so that we see that John and Connie are actually carrying extra Thunder Spears. So it adds an explanation on why the group had so many and were able to take out so many mindless ancient Titan shifters. So yeah, I think it actually is cool, and this is what I was mentioning earlier about, you know, Isayama going back in to add stuff to his work. Because yeah, he went back into the original, and he added stuff to fill in little plot holes or indiscrepancies. So yeah, it's very nice to look back at stuff like that. Because even if you don't like the ending or not, they did go back to at least make it make a little more sense if you thought it didn't make sense. Especially with more literal plot holes like that, instead of just changing the story completely. Lost Girls confirmed Eren will die. Now, I actually mentioned this earlier, so shout out to me for foreshadowing my own video. But basically, yeah, this is just the idea that Lost Girls, especially Mikasa's version of it, because Annie's has nothing to do with Eren, is basically just the confirmation and showing that no matter what timeline, Eren is, you know, eventually going to die young, chasing his ideals of freedom. And of course, you know, it shows this. Eren basically dies, and, you know, Mikasa was unable to save him. And even though it's a lot more literal here, because, you know, in Lost Girl, she literally gets held up and isn't able to stop Eren from going into the balloon. In the real timeline, obviously, she ends up having to stop Eren from continuing the rumbling and following his ideals to his conclusion. So yeah, pretty nice thing, and it really shows how Isayama was really ready to write shit and like foreshadow his ending super early on. Attack on Avengers. This refers to official Marvel comic where the Avengers and Titans crossover. There's really not much to that. It's just really interesting. I recommend reading it. It has some really cool art because, you know, you see the Avengers, you see the Titans. You know, it's a fun crossover. There's really not much to it. I haven't read the story, but I mean, the art looks cool. Like, I kind of said that twice, but yeah. And also, I might as well mention it because it's not on here. But another popular meme is the Cuck Avengers, which is what people used to call the Alliance during the ending of the manga and the ending of the anime. Specifically, this one came from Titan folk and fans who didn't like either the concept of the Alliance or they didn't like the ending. So yeah, that's just a fun entry that I think is at least tangentially related. Because there's even this one image, I have it up here right now, which has fucking the Alliance redrawn as the Avengers poster for the first movie. So yeah, that's really about it. 9 Titan variants. Now, I mentioned this earlier back in the first tier with Mimir's backstory, and it's pretty much the same idea then. Basically, maybe this is either a theory that the Titans differ based on user, which is true because we see stuff like the Jaw Titan and the Colossal Titan vary between users that we know in the main cast, as well as seeing the Ancient Titans from Eren's Founding Titan form. So we know for a fact that Titans do change. And of course also Eren's Colossal Titan form is different as well. But also, I think this might also refer to the fact that, you know, like I said, the 9 Titans didn't start as 9, you know, Titans. They started out as at least 3 with Ymir's family. And eventually they might have split into 6 and then split into 9. We don't really know how it happened, but I do like the theory that the original 3 from each of Ymir's daughters had aspects of 3 of the original Titans, or 3 of the eventual 9 Titans, and then would eventually form into those over time. Though it does beg the question of why they stopped continuing to, you know, spread, but Grisha brought the pandemic. Now this is a pretty simple one, and it basically refers to the fact that Grisha was probably the one to bring the pandemic that affected his wife, or his second wife, and her family, as well as the residents of Shiganshina. This is damn near all but confirmed, as we know he shows up in the city, the pandemic shows up, and of course him being a doctor, he's able to cure it. And this is just a fun nod to the fact that, you know, if someone comes from a very, like for example, if someone comes from, like, France to some uncontacted tribe in, like, you know, the middle of the rainforest, the tribe's gonna get infected by something because, you know, us, as, like, people who live in, like, normal society, we're vaccinated, you know, and we're probably immunized to a lot of diseases, but someone who lives in, like, an uncontacted tribe with medicine without that probably isn't going to be able to withstand it with their bodies. So, of course, you know, Grisha, coming from a highly advanced society with better medicine, is going to come in, and of course, a lot of people are going to get sick from that. So yeah, I just think that's a nice little detail, and I don't remember if it's stated or not, but, like, it's pretty much all but confirmed. Like, there's really no way to say it's not true, because it's pretty it's pretty obvious that like that's what happened. Tokyo Ghoul parallels. This one's another simple one. I haven't seen Tokyo Ghoul. Like I said, I don't really like reading manga that much because I'm just not a comics guy. I prefer normal books. And I haven't watched Tokyo Ghoul because I heard people say that the anime's bad. So I can't really say too much on it. So if you know anything, comment down below. That'd be great. But, you know, on the off chance I do watch Tokyo Ghoul, I'm not going to research this because I don't want to spoil. But yeah, just like Titanfall, apparently there's parallels to Tokyo Ghoul. So, very interesting. Manga female Titan is a different color. This just refers to the fact that in the manga, the female Titan is a slightly more washed out color than she is in her anime counterpart. There's really not much about this. It's the same as like the Mikasa scarf stuff. But instead of that, of course, there's not really any actual theories talking about it because it really is just a minor detail. Chapter 57, Dirty Message. This just refers to a sex joke in Chapter 57 of the manga. Not really much to it as well. Alright, and now we're finally on Tier 8. And we're coming up towards the end of the actual video because honestly, there's not much in these last few tiers. So, let's continue on. Opening and ending foreshadowing. This refers to the heavy amount of foreshadowing in all the openings and endings of the show. Of course, we already talked about Akatsuki no Requiem, and of course its accompanying music video, which isn't related to the show, which has what people thought would be foreshadowing. But of course, there's also just little foreshadowing bits in the opening and ending that people can take. This happens in damn near any anime, because of course the anime is going to show little details that happen at least in the season that the opening's covering. Dune/Eternal Champions influence on AOT. Now, I don't know about Eternal Champions, but I can actually talk about Dune because I've seen the movies and I actually do like the franchise a lot. And of course, I think the parallels are obvious with Eren and Paul being very similar, being these very bright-eyed characters who start out on the side of good, who eventually end up being kind of fucked up and evil towards the end. It's really that simple. Like, Paul, of course, becomes the Emperor, and of course he also, interestingly enough, he also is sort of responsible for his own downfall as he kind of lets that happen. And that also happens with Eren as he sort of lets Mikasa kill himself because he regrets what he's done. So I think that's another interesting parallel. And I just kind of realized that on the spot. I might be a little bit wrong because I haven't thought about the sequel to Dune in a minute, or Dune Eternal. But yeah, that is yeah, it's actually a very neat parallel. And this was actually written, at least this Iceberg was made before the ending. So it's even funnier to think that, yeah, there's even more of a Dune influence / inspiration in the show, which is very nice. Mikasa's headaches indicate alternate timelines. This theory basically says that Mikasa's headaches were her being indicated that like she's viewing an alternate timeline or something, but this doesn't. It's just not true. Because we know Mikasa's headaches are her basically being forced to obey a command from the founder, or in this case Eren, because he is the founder and he's like her handler as an Ackerman. But this would be interesting because we do know that Mikasa does view alternate timelines. Like, it's sort of implied in Lost Girls, at least in the anime, that Mikasa views that timeline while she's with Eren on the wall after season 3. And of course, we know that at some point, probably around the time Mikasa kills Eren, he gives her the memories of what would have been an alternate timeline if she decided to run away with Eren. But these are less linked to the headaches and more linked to just Eren showing things to Mikasa, whether consciously or subconsciously. OST hidden messages. This just refers to the fact that the OST might have hidden messages in the names or lyrics of some songs. I can't really be too sure because as much as I've listened, I haven't noticed any hidden messages. I think maybe the hidden messages are just the names having some secret that actually makes them comprehensible, but we'll never know. And now we're on tier 9. Like I said, very short tiers. There's literally only a few entries in these last few. So we're just going to keep going straight into the next entry, that being Eren killed his mom. This is exactly what it says. In chapter 139, we find out that Eren is basically responsible for manipulating multiple world events to get to the point where he is allowed to get the Founding and attack Titan. And one of these events, as he admits, is him allowing Bertold to live and survive the attack of Shiganshina, to allow a Titan to come inside and get his mom. And specifically, we even find out that Eren was the one to redirect the Smiling Titan specifically to go kill his mom. And I think it's also funny that basically he gets his mom to kill his or he gets his, it's hard, it's kind of weird, but he gets his dad's ex-wife to kill his mom, which is even funnier. And I don't know if there's supposed to be any meaning in that. We do see, you know, Dinah turn into the Smiling Titan, and of course she does serve as sort of a recurring antagonist in the first two seasons to Eren and Mikasa. But I don't think there's really any mention of the fact that Eren might know that Dinah is that Titan. He definitely does know, but I think it would be interesting if he mentioned it, probably, because that would have been funny. But yeah, that's really all there is. Beast Titan is based off of SCP-1000. Now, if you don't know what SCP is, it's basically this very large internet fandom where you basically make up your own like little monster, and it's contained by this foundation called the SCP Foundation, which is like a secret government organization that contains these things called anomalies, which can be anything from like just a cup that will never run out of its own liquid that it's filled with, to like some eldritch horror or stuff like that one really hard to destroy crocodile, or the one that's just a weeping angel that snaps your neck if you don't look at it. It's a very popular thing. I don't know too much about it. I have a few friends who love it, but this basically says that the Beast Titan is based off of SCP-1000, which SCP-1000 is, it's literally just Bigfoot. And the idea is that it's not just one Bigfoot, but that Bigfoot is actually a race of interdimensional, really smart apes that travel into our world every once in a while. And the theory is that, oh, the Beast Titan being the smart monkey titan is based off of that. And while that is interesting and there might be some sort of parallel, I really don't think that is. And I think the Beast Titan is just based off of the idea that, you know, monkeys are smart, and, you know, oh, what if we had the smart monkey titan? And it's less an SCP reference and just more of a shared cultural idea that just happened to, you know, come into two pieces of media that are really popular. Anarcho-primitivism themes. Now, I really have, I have no idea what this even means. But, I don't know. I really can't really give much of an explanation, and I'm going to continue on to the next entry too, because I don't have much of an explanation for these, that being disturbing /SNK/trip users. Now, I still don't know what /SNK/ is, so if anyone else can fill me in the comments, I'd be greatly in your debt, because I deadass don't know what that means. Alright, now we're at the final tier of the iceberg, and kicking things off is the Ymir rebirth theory. Now, this theory refers to the fact that people believe that Ymir would be reborn through Historia's baby, which I mentioned earlier, you know, with the theory of Eren and Historia being the father of Ymir, or father and mother of a reborn Ymir. And yeah, this just goes further in depth, saying that maybe Ymir would be reborn and then be able to finally take rightful rule over the Eldians or something after Eren finishes a full rumbling. We'll never really know. Isayama is Ishida. Now, this is another Tokyo Ghoul reference. This is a theory that Ishida is actually a pen name, and Isayama is actually the writer for both Tokyo Ghoul and Attack on Titan. This has really no truth to it, and it's just a wild speculation. But hey, there's a possibility that it is. We'll never know. Eren wrote history. Now, this is actually kind of true, because we do know that Eren at least manipulated a lot of history, specifically with the Attack Titan, to the point where he could, you know, become the Attack Titan. But I don't think Eren wrote all of history, but it is an interesting theory to think about. Eren is Isayama. Now, this just refers to the fact that maybe people believe that Eren is a self-insert for Isayama. Now, I don't really find this to be too true, but it could be possible. While Eren, obviously, he's a very fictional character. Like, you know, he has Titan powers and shit. But, like, a lot of the aspects of Eren can be seen as at least some traits of the writer. Like, especially his more human aspects towards the end, where he breaks down with Armin and talks about how he wants his girl that he likes to, you know, think about him for 10 years at least. And how he really cares about his friends. Like, that could absolutely be aspects that either Isayama took from other people or himself. Because, as a writer myself, I think, you know, I like to write characters based on experiences of people that I know, or, you know, that I know myself. You know, I like to write about myself, or I like to write about things I know. So it's very possible that Isayama has done the same thing, and maybe even either subconsciously or consciously wrote Eren as a self-insert character, though it's not confirmed anywhere. Alright, these next two entries are linked, so I'm going to show them both together, but these basically state that the power of the Titans is actually extraterrestrial, or it's a Lovecraftian type of thing. Now, the first one, obviously, is that the power of the Titans are from space. And I don't really know where it comes from, But actually, there is one possible source of this. Now, this obviously could just be a crack theory, but the YouTuber Fox and Anime, popular anime YouTuber who also covered Attack on Titan, in his video covering chapter 122, he actually did call the hallucigenia, which is the source of all living life or matter that we see in Attack on Titan, he called it an alien thing, which could have spread to the fan base and then made them think, oh, maybe it's an alien. So yeah, there's really not much about that besides that. And so yeah, next covering the next theory, which is the hallucigenia is Lovecraftian. And that's basically a counter theory saying instead of being an alien entity, it's actually a Lovecraftian elder god. And there's a theory, also the Iceberg, that I'm just going to add into this as well, that basically says that this entity existed just to cause violence so that it can feed some elder gods or whatever. And that would be a cool idea. And it actually sort of works with the story's themes because, you know, the Titans are sort of just a manifestation, or not a manifestation, but a representation of violence and prejudice, especially prejudice against one type of people. Because, you know, people not liking Eldians because they can turn into Titans. Like, that's obviously, you know, a very prejudiced thing. Like, oh, these people are monsters, but, you know, they're literally monsters. It's like X-Men. But it also is kind of antithetical to like what I think the theme of the story is, and I think the whole theme is about humans. So making, you know, the Titans and this whole cycle of violence being some elder god's plan, while cool, does also kind of remove a lot of meaning from the story, because it makes it less of a human thing and more of some actual big bad out there was just the cause of everything, and not just a human nature thing. So cool idea, but definitely not canon, but something interesting to explore at least. AOT shows the origin of humanity. Now, you could take this literally, as it's like, oh, Attack on Titan will eventually segue into the real world, and that's obviously not true. But it does show to sort of show like a microcosmic humanity. Like I said, you know, Attack on Titan is a story about war and hatred, and about the human psyche, or about human nature, at least in my opinion. And so, it does kind of show that sort of idea of how humanity sees itself and how they see other people. So it's a very meta thing. It's sort of just me kind of taking some meaning that wasn't there in the original entry, but I thought I'd mention this. And also it is interesting because it's sort of the same thing that like people kind of want Lord of the Rings to be, or not want it to be, but it's something that Tolkien said that he wanted it to be like a great myth for European people in the same way a lot of other cultures have that. And so people are saying that maybe Attack on Titan is supposed to be that thing, and more, instead of being seen as a literal origin, more of some great myth that would eventually lead to real life, with maybe the rumbling killing everyone, and then normal humanity coming from, you know, the ashes of the rumbling, literally. Which also adds to the Ragnarok theory, funny enough. Eren is showing the reader his memories. Now this is another counter to the Armin is, you know, the one narrating the story and recounting it to the UN, or the UN stand-in. But it's also not true because the entire manga isn't from Eren's POV, though it is also slightly possible because it could just be him showing other Eldians' memories. But I don't think it's explicitly stated that the Attack Titan has memories of all the Eldians, and just, I think it only has Attack Titan memories, and I don't think the founder has every memory either. But it could be possible, maybe in this theory's universe, Eren completes the rumbling and takes everyone's memories, and then shows the reader, which could possibly be his kid with Historia. But that's just a theory. But it is very interesting. But yet again, the story is only from, or not only from Eren's POV. We see other characters' POV. And of course, yet again, we do only have Eldian characters as POV characters, I think, so it could work. But it's just a little too far-fetched to not happen. And it does make more sense to be Armin telling people about his story, especially because we literally have the story, at least the original ending ends exactly on that, with Armin literally saying, we're gonna tell them everything. So this could be true, this could be false, we'll never know. Ramsey and Paths. This just refers to the fact that in the manga we see Ramsey in Paths before we see him fully a few chapters later. So that's just a very interesting thing. Reiner will die in the ending. This is just a theory saying that Reiner will die in the end. Obviously this didn't happen because we have the ending and we have even the last panel of at least of the Alliance, and we see that Reiner is surprisingly happy even though he has all that depression and PTSD. But you know, he probably got over it. We don't know how long between the rumbling and the actual ending of the alliance is, so we'll never know. But hey, we also don't know if Reiner didn't just blow his brains out after that scene either. So maybe someday Reiner will get the sweet release of death. We know he's eventually gonna die because he's a real person, you know. He's not immortal. He's gonna die when he gets to like 80 or something, but at least in the manga, we don't see him die on screen. Erwin would support the rumbling. This is just another fan idea that Eren would support the rumbling. Now, I mentioned this earlier with Erwin over Armin, and it's basically the same idea. Just the idea that Erwin would support the rumbling with Eren, and I think that's a very interesting idea that could be explored. Like, I feel like if we could get an Attack on Titan spin-off or a sequel, I feel like that would be something we should get. Like, maybe just an alternate timeline where events just happen slightly differently, like little choices just come back and change. Like, you know, Erwin getting chosen, maybe Annie doesn't freeze herself and dies or gets captured. Like, stuff like that, which would all culminate into a similar end, but obviously a different one. But that might not happen considering pretty much Isayama's just retired, and that's fine. He worked a lot, he wrote a really great story, and he deserves his retirement. But it would always be an interesting what if it's ever explored, either in official or non-official media. The cycle of violence will never end. Now, this is a theory or an idea that I've basically talked about basically throughout the entire Iceberg. It's the idea that the cycle of violence will never end, and that is something that the ending shows us. Despite the Alliance's efforts and them actually stopping violence at least for 100 or so years, we do see that it eventually restarts back up. And I think that's one of the more beautiful things about Attack on Titan and its idea, because while it does try to, you know, play a little both sides, like it obviously bends over backwards to show us that violence is the answer, but it also shows us how, you know, people are willing to try and stop it just for the idea of peace. It's very interesting, but I do like that in the end it does show that sometimes things are just natural. You know, humans are gonna want to be violent. Everyone wants revenge for something, and unfortunately that's what happens in the show. You know, Paradis gets bombed, and then we see the little boy going up to the tree, and we find out that, or we don't find out, but we see that he's probably going to become a Titan, and that will restart the whole Eldian shit all over again. And I think it's a beautiful ending. It's definitely an ending that's controversial, and a lot of people hated it when it came out and still don't like it to this day, but I think it works, so it is what it is. I don't want to change anyone's opinion on the manga. You know, it's your opinion. You get to choose what you think. But I like my own personal interpretation of the show, and I think it's a very measured take because, you know, I don't know, I believe in my own opinions, but yeah, that's really it. So moving on. Goth Mikasa is real. This is 100% a confirmed fact. Just go to your local Spencer's, go to the back, and you will find a real life Goth Mikasa waiting for you. And she wants to be your girlfriend too, and she loves you, and she's obsessed with you like Eren. So yeah, go to Spencer's and find your Goth Mikasa. It's 100% real, guys, trust me. Every game is personalized. Now, this is obviously a tradition, you gotta put this at the end of every Iceberg video, but simply put, every game of Attack on Titan 2 is personalized, and that's not really less of a theory or a creepypasta and more of just a real thing, because, as you know, in Attack on Titan 2, you have to create your own custom playable character, which personalizes every cutscene and every bit of gameplay. And of course, in modes like Territory Creation mode, your path through that mode will be completely different from my path. So yeah, it's less of a theory and more just, yeah, Attack on Titan 2 is objectively a personalized game because you make, you know, your choices. But I guess you could say that about anything. Even games that have like set routes, you know, they'll be personalized because, for example, in Dark Souls, not everyone's going to use the same weapons, you know. But especially with Attack on Titan 2, it's very personalized because you literally create your character. And also in modes like, you know, Final Battle mode, you can actually make slightly different choices to change the story. It still all recreates the same Season 3 story, but there are slight little branch paths. September 11, 2001. Now you're probably wondering, why am I mentioning the September 11 terrorist attacks in an Attack on Titan Iceberg? Well, that's because that actually happens in the show. During the Season 4, Part 3, Part 2 movie, or the Attack on Titan Final Attack movie, whichever version you watch, 9/11 just happens. Towards the end of the movie, when they're adapting the final 8 pages of the manga, we see that right before we see the panel of Paradis getting nuked, 9/11 happens. A helicopter just flies into a building, and that is seemingly what starts the war on Paradis. Now this is very interesting because In the manga, it was left up to interpretation of what caused the war that would eventually lead to the downfall of Paradis hundreds of years into the future after the rumbling. And a lot of people speculated that, oh, it was the Allied forces spinning back for the rumbling after they recovered their numbers. Others said that it was a Paradisian civil war. And the fact that it was left up to interpretation was a very interesting choice by Isayama, but I also like the fact that we got it confirmed that it was fucking 9/11. Like, I remember watching the original ending on a cracked live stream back in like 2022, and I remember just sitting there like thinking, oh, it's cool, they adapted the final 8 pages, and then out of fucking nowhere, 9/11 happens. Like, it's a very interesting thing. I feel like it's definitely a shitpost from the creators, but it is interesting to see a concrete reason why the war started on Paradis. Now, we don't know who was piloting the planes. It could have been people from the outside world who were spinning back from the rumbling. It could have been people from Paradis, maybe trying to protest or start a terrorist group or something against Jaegerist rule, or maybe Jaegerists trying to be terrorists against whoever's ruling in the current time. We'll never know. So there still definitely is an air of interpretation there. Like, we don't have 100%. We just know that 9/11 caused it, but we don't know what caused 9/11. But it is very interesting that the animators added that, because this was nowhere in the manga. We just went from a futuristic Paradisian city to it getting nuked. So yeah, it was a very interesting choice by Isayama and the team at MAPPA to add. But it was a very funny choice when it came to shock value, to just see that right at the end of, 10 years of one of the most popular mangas and animes. And that's it. I really want to thank anyone who's already here at this point. The video was a little scuffed, I'm not gonna lie, because this is my first time making really a video longer than like 30 minutes and actually editing it. But this video has been quite the passion of love and labor. And I mean, I originally wrote this script in like 2021, around the time season 4 part 2 ended. And I wanted to do it because Iceberg videos were getting popular, and I wanted to make something like that for something that I like, because I like talking about media. I love media. I wrote my own book, or am writing my own book. And I like Attack on Titan. I like talking about things that I like. I like talking about the themes, about little theories, about the characters. And so making this type of video was the ideal goal for me. And while it took a while, like, I'm pretty sure I referenced this in videos from years ago, I finally made it, and I'm happy I finally got to do it. Of course, this did take a while, and that's mainly because, I have a life as well. High school happened, and now I'm going to college a few days after I finish this video, hopefully. I'm trying to finish this before classes start. But, a lot of things happened, but I'm happy I could finally make this dream a reality. And of course, this is more of a passion project. I'm not really trying to do this to launch my channel back again. It'd be great if you subscribed and liked, because, hell, if I could make a little bit of money off of this video, that would be great. Like I said, I'm about to start college. And as you know, college students are always famously broke. So any little bit of extra cash would be great in my pockets. But that's all up to you. Like, I'm not telling you to donate directly to me. I'm just a guy, and I'm just doing this out of my own passion. And I do actually want to make more videos in the future. If you guys know who Chris Chan is, everyone knows who he is. Back around the time I was writing this script, he got arrested, and I did a lot of research into him. And I found out about the series called Hyperdimension Neptunia, which is a game series about anime girls that turn into video game consoles. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I played them to see why Chris was obsessed with them, and I think the games are very interesting, and no one really covered them on YouTube. So in my next videos, I'm going to be covering the main 4, maybe even 5, if you count Sisters vs. Sisters. I haven't played it yet, so I don't know if it's a spin-off or not. But I'm going to be covering the main 4 of those games as reviews. And those will come out eventually. Like I said, I'm starting college, and I have a job, and I have just a social life. So things are going to take a while, and especially since this isn't my main job. Like, I don't even have 1,000 subscribers. I won't be focusing on it too much, but I will be trying to make that video. And I'll hopefully try and make it a lot faster than this, because I've been hinting at this for 4 damn years. But like I said, these are all really passion projects until I start getting paid for real. But I'm just happy someone, even if it's one person, stuck to the end of this video, because I'm really happy that I finally got to make this, and this is something I've wanted for years. So yeah, if you really liked it, please like, subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And if you want to stick around, and if you wait patiently, one of these days I will eventually drop that Neptunia video, and then I'll drop the next one and the third one. Gotta hate the 3rd game, and you're gonna hear a lot about that in that series. And then a video on the 4th game, which I really love, besides the remake. The remake is dog shit. We'll talk about that too. So yeah, if you want to stick around for more reviews, not only will I be doing Neptunia, but eventually I want to do other games as well. I've thought of doing other icebergs, for example, like Fate Stay Night, which is a series that I love. So yeah, just stick around, make sure to like, subscribe, and it would mean the world to me if you guys would support this channel. So thank you very much, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.